So I say most people believe there is something dramatically wrong in this country. They're not sure what it is.
Got your labor next your soul, interest slave an endless hole. It's so deep you'll never leave, a text on key with no reprieve. Interest banking, future sold, paper money, fuck the gold. Print more money, there's no end, new interest rates thanks to the Fed. Inflation's up, we can't afford to import, source an endless hoard. Funding all this endless war, these the whores I must ignore. Feeling good, yeah that's my price. The system lets me have my vice. Bread and circus feels nice, feeling bad, take this advice. Just take this pill, watch TV, smoke weed and chill. Sports ball parties, man the grill. Watch some porn, drain your vril. Endless pleasure, wait until the lights go out, the lights are out. Holy fuck, the lights went out. The lights go out, the lights are out. Holy fuck, the lights went out. Never thought that this would happen. Should've prepped instead of fapping. Tires screeching, people scream. Living nightmare, not a dream. There goes all my dopamine, wiping off my jerk off cream. I'm flabby, weak and unprepared to own a gun. I'm really scared. Water filters, batteries, cans of food and MREs. I really should've bought that shit before the social fabric ripped. Atomized, I'm all alone, no internet, can't scroll my phone. The lights go out, the lights are out. The lights go out. Came on, I can't believe, breathe a sigh of great relief. Boy, I love modernity, endless goon sesh never leave. If you're sad, just take this pill. Watch TV, smoke weed and chill. Sports ball parties, man the grill. Watch some porn, join your grill. Endless pleasure, wait until the lights go out, the lights are out. The lights go out. The lights go out. The lights go out. The lights go out. The lights are out. Holy fuck, the lights went out. The lights go out. The lights are out. Holy fuck, the lights went out. The lights go out.
And we are back after a short little sabbatical. How are you doing today, Christopher Sandbatch?
I was going to say, it seems it's been forever since we've done this. Like titanic things have changed in the world. Mexico declared war on the United States. We met we'd met one another before, but it was an obscure incident. But the hosts of LMD actually know one another IRL for real now. So that's
yes. We have broken bread and shared salt and bread. That's right.
The downside is he actually knows I'm as crazy as I seem in real life.
This guy owns a pair of cowboy boots that do not fit his feet.
That's true. That's true. Those things, they're almost
elves' shoes,
dude. They were fine for like first year and a half.
Real quick, your gain is like high as hell.
No, it's not. I turned it down. Maybe I turned it. No, I turned it way up.
You turned it way up. That's right.
Yeah. Is that better?
A little bit. Yeah, it's a lot better. So as diligent, studious, and observant chatters may notice, the chat now appears in the video feed, which is great because it will allow us to edit the videos without completely losing the chat replay. That's right. Yeah, EL says, turn that gain back up and whisper into the mic to us. All right, we're doing 3 hours of ASMR. Can you edge the entire time?
Yes.
So you said your cowboy boots were good for the first year, and then they were.
Yeah, they're just beat to shit now. I need to get new ones, but like, it's like I get so many strange compliments on them, but like they I need to get the kind that you just replace the soles in.
Yeah,
but
a good pair.
Yeah, dude, a good pair is expensive. Like cowboy boots are not cheap at all. It's like you're looking at like
I've seen what
600.
Yeah, I've seen what those Mexican cowboy stores. Those things that's where all the money goes.
No, it literally this like
drywall and roofing money goes.
This is something that both the Scots-Irish people and the Scots-Irish and the Mexicans have an incredible number of at least passive traits in common. And if you consider this at the social level, at the society-wide level, Los Angeles starts to make more sense. But like one of the things that the Mexicans and Scots-Irish have in common is their love of movable wealth, which is like, like massive investments in things that can be worn or carried around in a truck. Both the Scots-Irish and Mexicans are huge. They're always wearing jewelry. They'll have guns and jewelry, and like just like you go past their house.
They really trick their cars.
Yeah, they'll live in a trailer and have like 2 sports cars. What the hell?
Oh, it's like a house with with enough vehicles parked outside of it that the vehicles are worth more than the home.
Yeah,
that's right. Seen that one. The I gotta say, Gabe is in the chat knowing a little too much about Mexican families. I'm just saying. Does your car play La Cucaracha when you press the horn? It does. I know for sure. I've heard it in the background.
I would love to see the wait list or the customer list, like the list for the moment GM announces a new El Camino. It'll just going to be entirely Joneses and Gonzalez's, and that's going to be it.
I mean, I almost bought a Subaru Brat off of Facebook Marketplace for $6,000 the other day.
Gabe's in Texas? I had no idea.
He just location doxed himself.
Yeah.
LMD. That's horrible. Yeah, he lives under the Hanuman statue. Little goblin man. Yep.
I am not in Texas right now. That's another thing that this is sort of temporarily changed again. I'm back in hell, back in the lowest of the low places. And in fact, like I say, I've been back in New Orleans for 5 days, and I may leave again soon, but I've been back in New Orleans for 5 days, and for 4 of the days that I've been here, the local utility company has already started load shedding. So yesterday, half the city was out of electricity for no reason other than it got turned off.
I shed a bunch of loads yesterday too.
Oh my god!
I don't have a government instituted monopoly on anything.
Yeah. The other thing that happened is I finished one of the books that I've started. So one down. It's not the one everybody wanted me to finish first, but that's just the way it fucking goes.
Oh, what did you do?
I finished I had a book of poems that I've been working on for almost a year that I guess it was probably last night at 2:00. I finished the last one. It's I was like, oh yeah, it all came together. So I gotta edit it and then figure. Unfortunately, it's good enough that I'm in the process of deciding whether or not to self-publish it, or it's good enough that it may need to go to Copper Canyon or somewhere like that. So I'm also about to blue balls myself to death over it. So that would be another 18 months before it gets published. So I'm thinking just shove it out and
should probably give it to any of our guys if you're gonna publish it. That's just my advice. I'm just saying. We do have a lot of indie presses.
Yeah, so. Copper Canyon's an indie press.
I know,
but who? I don't know. Do we have anybody that would publish poetry though?
Yeah, absolutely. New Ritual might.
I was thinking
I
Dan.
would also say that Arbogast's imprint, which is 1329, I think. So, MG had to pause the stream for a bit. I think my neighbor's beating his wife or something. Well, I mean, go get that video. Throw that shit up on World Star. You get some, get some ad rev, and then kick it over to your boys with a super chat.
Yeah.
Don't have an entropy because we were trying to figure out entropy again today. I think entropy requires OBS now. I could be wrong. If someone knows, feel free to DM me and help me figure this out because I am so dumb. Yeah.
Go for the long-term prestige of Our Guy Publishing. History will remember it.
That's right. When much like Paladin Press, future chuds are attempting to collect the entire bibliography.
We're way afield here right now, but I mean, there is an Our Guy place that would be absolutely ideal for it, which is Double Dealer. They're not like announced as a publisher, and
they also don't double exist right now.
Right, they don't like Mackie is like insisting that it like Double Dealer is gone forever. It's like the fucking Eagles, like we're never touring again.
It's double.
Yeah, it's the Double Dealer's second death.
Yep.
And the only way I can think of to get that to work is that I literally drive up to his house and not with a gun because he's got way more guns and way more expertise with guns than me, and just harangue him until he agrees to let me be the EIC and do all the bullshit work for him. But then that creates I'm not dodging the problem that I initially have, which is that publishing yourself is kind of gay.
Why don't you I think that the Double Dealer should just be Spartacus, where people can just say, I am the Double Dealer, and as long as they have the right count, it's fine.
It's not a bad idea. But it's it's a turbo Southern collection. There's no way around it. I might give it to Dan, see if he wants to publish it, but just turbo actually Southern. And I feel I kind of want to give it to somebody with that kind of branding.
I feel like John Slaughter should have done Magnolia League press when he put out his book.
That's probably true.
Just done it. He should have just done it.
That's the house. There should be a Southern publisher. There should be.
Yep.
Double Dealer's the right brand for it, and we just gotta there's Big Troll Mackie, who hopefully is listening tonight and is being bullied, is being pressured. He has to be properly pressured for it to happen.
That's right. All right. Well, everyone in chat, go tell JL Mackey, aka Tom Edgman, to restart the Double Dealer. Triple deal it. Do it again.
Oh my God, yes! First issue back, a monkey the Double Dealer monkey, but Jolly West, and it's
Yep. The Triple D, the Double D. That's right. So, as you may recall, last time we ended on an economic statement about how Teddy Kennedy would give up his mansion, airplane, and yacht and move into a $25,000 home with a $20,000 mortgage, like the rest of us. Which what a time in 1972 when you could live in a house that cost $20,000 rather than
it's the same house that you get today too. It's the same starter house you get today, but now nothing in it works and it costs $250,000.
Well, I mean, people build if you go to the parts catalog for a tough shed, which is those sort of don't need a foundation garden sheds that they sell in the parking lot at Home Depot.
Yeah,
parts list on a tough shed will reach $20,000 pretty quick. So
Damn.
you don't even you get an unpowered, uninsulated building for $20K nowadays.
Everybody,
right.
all the Mexicans and Scots Irish.
Oh, and it doesn't come with the land either.
Yeah, all the Mexicans and Scots Irish are out there thinking about how like, oh man, I can fit so many guns and sets of turquoise studded cowboy boots in this bitch, you know.
slaps the top of their tough shed.
Yeah.
Do you know what a barn dominium is?
You know, barn dominiums are a thing. They're not things you would think Austin is a place where you see lots of barn dominiums, but
I would not think that.
I was gonna say because we were in Nashville. We were in Nashville recently, and I spent more time in Nashville than you did, I think. And I was like blown away by the number of barn dominiums that were like being developed, probably by real estate developers who also have land in Austin. Because I did notice also that a lot of the same like sort of like brand name, like sort of like you know, like real estate brands and like slogans were in both. But I'll bet like they're like, oh yeah, the Nashville version of like Outcast properties, you know, sublabeled Outcast East is barn dominiums. There's shitloads of barn dominiums all around Nashville. I was like, this is so trashy, but I'm no jokes. Oh, Vulpus over here is like, I'm in a barn dough. It's tight. I thought he was European. There's barn dominiums in Europe.
He's in the States. But
okay, yeah.
So barn doughs. So for those who don't know, a barn dominium or a barn dough is basically a steel frame barn building that is finished out as a residence. And to be honest, they piss me off as much as they excite me from a design perspective, because it's a modular building. The problem is that everyone who like puts one together allows it to look like a barn on the outside, but it's a steel structure with like curtain walls hanging off of it. You could shape them like anything. They could be any shape. It's just that they're like, and then the interiors are frequently done in like a really blah kind of suburban interior. I want to do one and make it like hyper modern. Right?
Yeah, that's actually cool. That sounds like a really cool idea, actually. Because the aesthetics of them are usually what I don't like.
Yeah, I mean, you could also make you could make like a mid-century modern one really easily. You know, it's just like because you just need one roof angle, right, to do it. So it's, I don't know, that the promise is there, the execution is lacking. That's my opinion on barn doughs. But anyway, in any case, that is the cheapest way to get a permanent non-mobile structure. By the way, if something
with the title,
yeah, exactly, a title that's not a motorcycle. That's right. Anyway, so we're gonna get started on the reading. We're continuing to unravel. There's like the end of the cathedral section, and then we're gonna get into international bankers. And by that, of course, we mean we're going to be talking about the Qataris a lot.
Interestingly, Curtis Yarvin leaves off there's no section on international banking.
Isn't it weird that he doesn't mention banking? Yeah. Huh. All right. We are usually told that this clique of super rich is socialists because they have a guilt complex over wealth they inherited and did not earn. Again, they could relieve these supposed guilt complexes simply by divesting themselves of their unearned wealth. There are doubtless many wealthy do-gooders who have been given guilt complexes by their college professors, but that doesn't explain the actions of insiders like the Rockefellers, Fords, or Kennedys. All of their actions betray them as power seekers. But the Kennedys, Rockefellers, and their super-rich confederates are not being hypocrites in advocating socialism. It appears to be a contradiction for the super rich to work for socialism and the destruction of free enterprise. In reality, it is not. Our problem is that most of us believe socialism is what the socialists want us to believe it is, a share the wealth program. That is the theory. But is that how it works? Let us examine the only socialist countries, according to the socialist definition of the word, extant in the world today. These are the communist countries. The communists themselves refer to these as socialist countries, as in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Here, in the reality of socialism, you have a tiny oligarchical clique at the top, usually numbering no more than 3% of the total population. What else is 3% of the total population?
Hey.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Controlling the total wealth, total production, and very lives of the other 97%. Certainly, even the most naive observe that Mr. Brezhnev does not live like one of the poor peasants out in the great Russian steppes. But according to socialist theory, he is supposed to do just that.
This is... I wonder where he arrived at that 3% number.
I wonder where he arrived at the 3% number.
I'm really curious. Did he just make that up? Because I've never seen anybody use a 3% as the benchmark.
We're going to be euphemistically talking about something completely different. So we're going to go through all of the euphemisms we can think of.
Right.
It's
but on a more serious note, I seriously wonder about that number, because we always hear about the 1% today, and I'm curious if if there was some major shift in the total amount of money that was available in the 1970s, or the wealth disparity in the 1970s is being accurately reflected there, and it's just gotten worse now, or if this dude is just spitballing, and it could go either way, but it's actually sort of interesting. It's also interesting to note here that it's not socialism, it's capitalism. This argument has been going on now for at least 45 years. So the next time you feel like getting involved in an argument over the definition of socialism or capitalism, just remember that you're not going to convince anyone.
It will never end.
Right.
Yes, it will never end. Remember, you're here forever. The ride haveth no brakes. That is absolutely it. And as Johnson points out, the 1% is a rhetorical figure. There's nothing behind it. Yeah, it's nothing. The top 1% of 1% of 1%. Yeah, what do you do? What is that? How many times do we have? Well, actually, I guess we know how many times you have to do that until you're just talking about one guy, right? What would that be? How do you get to?
It's probably 5 iterations before you're talking about. We can probably get it down to one group chat in 3 iterations, though.
That's true.
Eventually you get to the PayPal Mafia group chat, and that's it. Yeah.
that one GC.
Yeah.
All right. If one understands that socialism is not a share the wealth program, but is in reality a method to consolidate and control the wealth, then the seeming paradox of super rich men promoting socialism becomes no paradox at all. Instead, it becomes the logical, even the perfect tool of power-seeking megalomaniacs. Communism, or more accurately, socialism, is not a movement of the downtrodden masses, but of the economic elite. The plan of the conspirator insiders, then, is to socialize the United States, not to communize it.
Right.
Here's what he's trying to do is he's trying to redirect populist sympathies to capitalism, essentially.
Yeah, that's just the emergence of movement conservatism, and that's essentially what they do. But again, just the argument, though, Gabe. But it's interesting to note here, because we are we do keep returning to sort of Curtis or whatever. Okay, I'm trying to decide if I should do this now or if I should let Gary cook for a minute. Actually, we'll let Gary cook for a minute, and then I'll do it. If we haven't gotten to,
we're gonna get to another. We're gonna be in another great. We're gonna have another great chart here. We're gonna talk
Right,
about
yeah.
this chart a little bit.
That's what I was like. I see the chart there, and I'm like, I'm gonna let him cook through this chart, and then I'm gonna have a breakdown. We're gonna do a breakdown. But go ahead, yeah.
How is this to be accomplished? Chart 3 shows the structure of our government as established by our founding fathers. The Constitution fractionalized and subdivided governmental power in every way possible. The founding fathers believed that each branch of the government, whether at the federal, state, or local level, would be jealous of its powers and would never surrender them to centralized control. Also, many phases of our lives, such as charity and education, were put totally or almost totally out of the grasp of politicians. Under this system, you could not have a dictatorship. No segment of government could possibly amass enough power to form a dictatorship. In order to have a dictatorship, one must have a single branch holding most of the reins of power. Once you have this, a dictatorship is inevitable.
Thanks, guys. I mean, it was all God. It's worth pointing out. He sounds like CNN does now, and it is sort of interesting to note that because I saw James
separation of powers.
Yeah. It's like it is sort of interesting to note that it's quite literally the people, because this is what published it's the Nixon. There's Buchananism is straight out of the Nixon administration. It is interesting to note that the federal government, as it currently stands today, has consolidated virtually all power into the executive branch, with the legislature being functionally non-existent, and the judiciary exists only now in the sense that it can, in fact, slow down the executive branch. But there is some truth to the arguments that he's made here, but it's sort of interesting to note that he does also fall back on the idea. He does fall back on the idea that even in the 1970s we had, or that that top part of that chart worked at all. It's I don't know that it's ever worked, but this is the myth building that we've been working with. Yeah, and again,
it's also not. I mean, it also is obviously not really how it works. Police aren't a co-equal. So we see here he has police as a co-equal independent thing from the government, just like he has education.
The top chart. I'm really not certain now that I'm looking at it closer. I'm really not sure where it came from or what even what it's supposed to represent, or why the arrows are not equally spaced and why they're not all the same length.
The kerning is dog shit.
Yes.
Who kerned this?
Again, everything of his data visualizations thus far have been among the worst. I almost want to make a course on the rudiments of data viz and use these as examples on exactly what not to do.
Right. So the idea that labor, business, and finance are co-equal and independent also, I don't know. This is a very silly chart. It doesn't make any sense.
What even is labor according to this chart? Because I noticed also we have had it's not really clear.
The workers.
Yeah, it's not really clear how finance and business are separate from one another according to all information we've had in this book so far. And it's also not entirely clear. It is clear what labor is, and it means fucking commies. But it's also not clear what charity, police, or education are. And I'm not really sure where, I don't know. But
when this was written, we still had significant factory workers.
That's true. Yeah. I do think it's also now, I can do my little breakdown here, though, and point out that, okay, say, if you're considering everything that we've just heard, about the nature of socialism and everything like that, I want you to consider for a moment, again, our friend Curtis Yarvin. And I'm actually gonna be very critical of him here, though I hope not too many people in the chat are still sort of transfixed by Yarvinism. But if you understand that because Curtis was born, I think he's probably born around the time this book came out. And the the myth he's sort of working with here, the myth when I say myth, I don't even necessarily mean that it's not true. I just mean the like sort of the religious structure on which, you know, all of these political arguments are thresholded.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, you know, that what you just heard is more or less true. And Yarvin even participates to one extent or another in the myth that that top part of that chart is at least theoretically how it's supposed to happen. I would submit that actually at no point in time is that top part of that chart, or even the way the conservative argument has been laid out here, at no point in time has the United States ever been supposed to actually operate that way. But it does make a nice thing that you can sort of punch at. But if you imagine that give the definition of socialism that was just given here, that was just laid out for us, you know, and you imagine Curtis Yarvin's actual argument for monarchism. Okay. Everything Curtis Yarvin does is lay out exactly the argument for socialism that has just been given to us, except he sprite packs it. He downloads a different sprite pack and says, "Oh, instead of the Central Committee, we're going to call these dark elves." Or something, some shit like that.
He reskinned it. You downloaded the based skin.
Yes, he's literally just downloaded the Trotskyite base skin. Is exactly what he did. And you know, like when you're like looking at Yarvinism, you're literally just looking at an argument for what kind of socialism the left in 1967 to 1972 or so was really interested in. And wow, when you think about everything else about him, like it suddenly makes sense that like he's like literally just, this is the like neo reaction is literally just the new left with a different sprite pack.
So
right, now that we've
I got rid of it.
No. It shouldn't be too hard because it's just one of the you got to go forward, I think. Yeah, there we go.
A dictatorship was impossible in our republic because power was widely diffused. Today, as we approach democratic socialism, all power is being centralized at the apex of the executive branch of the federal government. This concentration of power makes a dictatorship inevitable. Those who control the president indirectly gain virtual control of the whole country. So the one thing that I'm really noticing about this book, while having a lot of like, I guess, sort of core correct observations, maybe, is that it's also insanely naive.
Yeah, it's incredibly, and it's frustrating. I mean, I've been really critical of the book so far, and this is like me. Actually,
this ain't no Wendy painting,
right? I was gonna say it's like whenever I read any book, it's turbo unusual for me to not be an absolute hater all along the way. I was actually just curiously transfixed by Wendy painting, and like her, and she wrote one of the best books I've ever read. So like this is like more baseline for me is like just to bitch about everything. But the thing that's probably most frustrating here is that there are so many like nuggets of truth, things that we know to be true, wrapped in other stuff that is so not true. And it's sort of maddening. It's like, oh, he gets this right, but then he like takes a left-hand turn into the most naive bullshit you've ever heard, you know?
And it's also like it's also transparently agitpropped, you know, like the fact that this is he like, I don't know, the first episode we did on this, he told a story that was just patently untrue to make a point, and you know, like, I don't know, I have kind of a little only a very slight amount of patience for that sort of thing.
Yeah, me too. And with me, like, we were actually rolling through like a lot of the things that to me are embarrassing about like sort of American right-wingism at the same time, like sort of starting to see bits of it that are true. So it's like they're like, but it is interesting to see like the mythological root of all of the bullshit that I hate boomer cons for.
Caravaggio does make a good point. Yeah, I mean, so the audience for this for this book is, not us. It's supposed to be onboarding turbo normies, right?
Right.
Which by most measures we can say it was successful in that, right? Like
Yeah,
maybe
it was
the product he needed.
The authorial voice of it is, yeah, give it credit for effectiveness is right. I'm also struck again by the fact that it's another thing that's really interesting. Imagine whenever you're listening along with this, how much more of the total population that was reading this book had some form of military training at some point in their lives.
True.
And so like
significant portion.
Because I mean, there's three wars in which we did total mobilization under their belt. So you got World War II, Korea, and then Vietnam. We're actually still in Vietnam, tangentially.
At the time,
yeah. As this book comes out.
All right. The English philosopher Thomas Hobbes noted, "Freedom is government divided into small fragments." Woodrow Wilson, before he became the tool of the insiders,
oh my God,
observed insiders could be here. This history of liberty is a history of the limitations of government power, not the increase of it. And the English historian Lord Acton commented, "Power," the favorite Lord Acton, right? "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Even though these men lived after our Constitution was written, our forefathers understood these principles completely."
Now, what's really interesting here to me is I think everybody in the chat knows my second favorite president is Woodrow Wilson. I'm one of the thieves for timeshare owners.
Timeshare owners, amazing.
Yes. It's interesting here to note the historiography of anti-Wilsonism, because I don't know what he's doing here whenever he says, as Woodrow Wilson, before he became a tool of the insiders. That's an interesting...
This is the ultimate anti-globalist book. Woodrow Wilson founding the League of Nations.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me here that they're positing a vision of Woodrow Wilson where there is a Woodrow Wilson before he became the tool of the insiders.
Oh, fair enough.
Which is something that you don't see on either the left or right anymore. Woodrow Wilson is probably the most despised president by both sides of the aisle in the United States right now. He used to be considered, he's been considered a left-wing progressive hero before. And at the time this was being written, Woodrow Wilson was still like universities were still naming things after Woodrow Wilson. He was considered to be one of the greatest presidents in American history by the left, at the Native American left at the time. The right is already starting to develop their neuroses about him. But I'm wondering what the historiography on Wilson was that Larry Abraham is working with, where there's a moment where Woodrow Wilson is a good guy and becomes a bad guy, because you don't see any of that anymore. There's like no countenancing Woodrow Wilson at all.
The sea change. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, figuring out the public sentiment of Woodrow Wilson over the years would be very interesting. Because at one time he was the golden boy.
Right? In my Substack, I did a
Yeah.
Substack article a while back in December. And I rated him the third most important president in American history after Thomas Jefferson and FDR.
But you don't have to be good to be important.
Right. Yeah. That may be crucially, you don't have to be good to be important. It's interesting how he's actually sort of footnoted mainstream academic histories now very rarely even mention him. So the rose is off. And
because it's not like anything consequential happened when he was president.
Right. and the right just sort of universally hates him based on essentially texts like this. I think we should all join hands and reassess Woodrow Wilson, who conquered Europe for America and drugged the South out of poverty.
All right. I'm willing to hear the case for Woodrow Wilson at a different time.
Right. Yeah, I'm not going to do it right now.
Yeah. Okay. But what is happening today? As we move leftward along the political spectrum towards socialism, all the reins of power being centralized in the executive branch of the federal government. Much of this is being done by buying with legislation or with free federal grants all the other entities. Oh no. Oh no, he cooking. Maybe
Yeah.
that's the strategy here. He has to build up a bunch of goodwill with these like little softball things, and then he drops the real shit. I don't know. Maybe that's the goal.
This
Anyway.
is one of these. Yeah, finish this paragraph. And
Yeah,
then I'm gonna
Money
go
is
off
used
again.
money is used as bait, and the hook is federal control. The Supreme Court has ruled, and in this case quite logically, that it is hardly lack of due process for the government to regulate that which it subsidizes.
So you can see here again, I think we've talked about this book as one of the most influential in right-wing American history, and everything. Here's one of these bad habits that's learned in this text right here. Like, you're seeing it happen. Like, why did everyone cheer on as Doge seized control of the federal funding apparatus and then just shattered it right in front of us? Like, why is Lomas having to write opinion pieces about what we should really be doing with, the federal granting process? And it's right here. Like, it's one of the things that got grabbed for some reason.
You mean destroying power rather than using it?
Yes. Like, that's
the theoretical destruction of power rather than using it.
Right. It's been packaged right here in this paragraph, along with a lot of the other mainstream conservative shibboleths. And that narrative is just buried too deeply to excise.
You think it's buried too deeply to excise? That like obviously, like, this is, his goal here is libertarianism, right?
Right.
But the observation, of course, there that was the way that the government started to gain control of extremely local processes that were before very local.
Yeah,
right?
This is true. I mean,
the observation is correct.
Yeah,
and it's a thing that only got worse since he wrote it. So
that's one of the things here that's so frustrating. It is really frustrating to me because of the idea of the book as a vector of an ideological program, which is that it's not like the normie book reader has a very difficult time disaggregating one concept from one book. And so, like, the whole thing has to go in pretty much just like that. And it stays that way. It's hard to alter it. Like, you can't just pull that piece out. And and the rest of the argument will start to fall apart. K lines get crossed. It's frustrating. But yeah, continue.
If you and your clique wanted control over the United States, I do. It would be impossible to take over every city hall, county seat, and state house. You would want all power vested at the apex of the executive branch of the federal government. Then you would have only to control one man to control the whole shebang. If you wanted to control the nation's manufacturing, commerce, finance, transportation, natural resources, you would need only to control the apex, the power pinnacle, of an all-powerful socialist government. Then you wouldn't have a monopoly and could squeeze out all your competitors. If you wanted a national monopoly, you must control a national socialist government. If you want a worldwide monopoly, you must control a world socialist government. That is what the game is all about. Communism is not a movement of the downtrodden masses, but it is a movement created, manipulated, and used by power-seeking billionaires in order to gain control over the world. First by establishing socialist governments in the various nations, and then consolidating them all through a great merger. Let's add that to the board of great things.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. Into an all-powerful world socialist superstate, probably under the auspices of the United Nations. That is actual naivete, right? Like, the goal has not been the United Nations; it has been the United States. The idea that the United Nations, that the U.S. was a an equal partner in the United Nations process
Right.
is incredibly naive and has been something that was, even through the 90s, basically until, I don't know, maybe 2008, as late as 2008, the United Nations was the boogeyman. And then it became clear that the United States was the United Nations. Like
Right.
nothing
Yeah.
else, nothing else mattered.
It's a
It's probably
colonial
not. It's probably
instrument.
like 2004, actually, shortly after the invasion of Iraq. I think they just stopped. I think that stopped being the storyline.
Johnson says you're doing it. But here's just some funny things that have happened here. First of all, we get the patented BoomerCon all caps socialist for some reason. And it's interesting to note that he's occasionally he does this shit where he switches into the second person. And it's like a film noir. It's like a film noir interlude where like he shuts the door, turns all the lights off, and points the lamp directly at you. It's like, if you and your clique wanted to control the United States, it's like, and you catch the guy being like, yeah, I want to control the United States.
Yeah, exactly. So whenever, and also that is a rhetorical trick when someone shifts from the third person, when someone shifts from like basically third perfect into second person, then they are like setting the hook. Like they are uploading the information directly to you because now it's addressing you.
Yeah,
right?
It's conspiratorial.
Yeah. Like you will you will take this information on board much better if you're just directly reading something in the second person.
Oh, Johnson says, Sandy calling me out. Look, I'm on board with whatever funds my poetry projects best. So like that's
all right. The balance of this book will outline just how they have used communism to approach that goal. Chapter 3. The money manipulators. Who are the money manipulators?
Yeah, man in back shouts, Yeah.
Many college history professors tell their charges that the books they will be using in the class are objective. But stop and ask yourself, is it possible to write a history book without a particular point of view? There are billions of events which take place in the world each day. To think of writing a complete history of a nation covering even a year is absolutely incredible. Very, very true, obviously.
That's some doggone bullshit when you think about it, ain't it, boy?
What do you
right here?
What do you how do you feel about the change as a trained historian, as a trained symbol clanging monkey for academia,
as a trained running dog of the kulaks in the university system?
How do you feel about the change from the word history to historiography?
Well, they've both been around. Okay, they're totally different things. One, like history, the concept of history itself is historiography is much simpler than history is. It is a much less loaded term. In fact, historiography is actually just the word for how we explain the word history. Is really what it is. But it's the history of history. In like the great Como recursive feedback loops. We're like right here though, where this is the moment in the historical field, and the historical field is really, I think, was Larry Abraham, isn't that what his degree was in? Can't remember. I think his degree is in history. So this is like right around the time Peter Novick's book, History and the Objectivity Question, comes out. European historians have pretty much already cast the idea of like objective, knowable history in the trash bin for almost 40 years by now. But this comes to America, and it comes to both sides of the political fence in America at almost exactly the same moment. And that's really whenever you see like the beginning of the growth of the current like sort of political alignment. I think it's dumb, but I think it's dumb because I think everything that's happened this is why I think my own field is dumb now, because because and I write poetry instead. But I think that we have, with these switching of these terms and this like public discourse about what history is, the objectivity question, so on and so forth, we've actually used large slices of the like conscious brain power of normies, teaching them the most recursive, useless feedback bullshit in the world, where you still find people saying things like to prepare for the future, we have to learn the mistakes of the past. It's not fucking true at all. There's no reason to believe that. It's like, because you know what all history is.
All mistakes are context dependent to begin with. And second off, and second off, you are like, all of the mistakes that were made are a precondition for you.
Right, exactly. It's like I sometimes think that by studying history, we actually make ourselves retarded about the future, because then we start countenancing all of these bad outcomes that happened from past, like from sort of past like scenarios, and then we hyperstition them back into reality. And I'm like, oh my fucking god, we're actually making the problem worse. But this is like another one of those things. It's like teaching normies, like letting normies know that, giving normies the idea that everyone can just construct their own history however they want, has been a disaster for American politics. And like, this is the big birth of it on the conservative side here. It's like literally. But then conservatives in particular will do this thing where they recognize the absolute subjectivity of history, and then they will continue to say that that theirs is in fact objective. It's like, oh fuck. Okay.
Well, you gotta see. Well, but you have to try to claim the high ground, right?
Yeah, this is. I mean,
you're in a contest. You're in a contest.
When I finish all these other books I'm working on, because that's going to be the next one that I write, is the book on the history question. And like, it's
the HQ.
It's literally, it's going to be called The History Question, and it'll be really interesting, I think, because like, of all the books that I'm planning on writing, this is actually the only one that deals with my actual specialty. So
I think
it's the book people have wanted me to write for like a decade. So yeah. Have I ever told you what one day I'll write a book on
political demonology.
Yeah, have I ever told you what my actual thesis was on? Like, it's like, this is like my narrow specific field. My thesis was on different competitive varieties of nationalism in the United and their European sources between the years 1850 and 1860. But I only really dealt with the South. But like, I could see through the looking glass that there was plenty of stuff going on in Boston and Manhattan too. But that's like narrow. This is very narrowly what I'm actually kind of an expert in. All these competitive narratives of history. I'm really more of a historiographer than a historian.
Well, that's kind of that's the thing. I mean, and to be clear, like my answer to the question that I posed to you just a little bit ago is that I think historiography is actually a more honest word for doing it, for exactly the reason that Mr. Allen pointed out.
Yeah, in fact, and a real good example of that, Wendy
talking about the various narratives.
Yeah, that last book was almost entirely historiography rather than history.
That's right. Not only is a historian's ability to write an objective history limited by the sheer volume of happenings, it's happening, but the fact that many of the most important happenings never appear in the papers or even in somebody's memoirs.
This is objectively true. Like, this is why we have all of these, like, if you were to build, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you were to build a series of if everybody in the audience, if all of us and all of the audience were to build a set of 10 events that they think are the most important 10 events from the last century and a half, we would all come up with a different list. My list would be better than everyone else's, but
I mean,
what I did?
There would, we would definitely, yes, thank you. Yes. I mean, I'm pretty sure you would not, Sandbatch would have the spiciest list because he wouldn't include 9/11.
I would not include 9/11.
There we go. We go. You fucking hipster.
But but what I might do is include I would do, and this is what he means by like
I would include Osama bin Laden and George W. Bush partying together in college.
Yes, that, and I would put Charlie Wilson. I would put Charlie Wilson getting the entire State Department under his thumb as a thing that was upstream and causative of the 9/11 debacle. Like I would have MK Ultra and I would have the antecedents on there, and then I would be able to say, but you never hear the history of Dr. Joylan West, you know.
Oh, obviously, Jolly West writing the DDD paper is insanely important,
right? But it's one of those things. Yeah, I would also have another paper that was written. I would have the publication of the double structure of the double helix on there as well, and I wouldn't have 9/11. And like these are not things that historians. It's also really interesting. Here's another fascinating thing about historians. Historians are some of the shittiest historians ever because they really don't.
Historians are some of the shittiest historians ever is not actually a strong statement because the shittiest historians ever obviously were historians.
Right. Yeah. Well, exactly. But I mean, just like even in probably the average chemical engineer in the United States above the age of 60 years old, just from shit that's happened in his own field that he's aware of, is probably a better historian than most historians are who are trained on history, you know, so they're trained on like legislature and shit. Like they're not as a general rule going to consider the discovery of the double helix because it's not inside. And actually my favorite historian, Reinhard Koselleck, has a phrase for this. It's called Erfahrungsjam or something. I don't know the German word, but it's called the space of experience. It's not something that's in their space of experience. And there's a real sense in which we define modernity, which is we can define modernity itself in terms of these two questions. Was it possible for someone to learn everything? It could, like all of the things in the world that had happened in world history constitute their space of experience. And then what do they in particular leave out of theirs that's important? And it turns out historians leave almost all the important shit out of their own space of experience. It's mind-boggling to me. That was a lot at once. I'm sorry.
That was a lot at once. No, but I agree with you. Like obviously whenever, and you know, even Gary Allen mentioned this type of effect earlier in the book, where if you read about a topic or if you read about an event that you were present at in the newspaper, you see the distortions. Every single person who reads the history of a thing, right, on a topic in which they are well versed, will notice all of the gaps and distortions.
Yeah.
Right. So, let's see here.
In order to build his case, I think.
The decisions reached by the big boys in the smoke-filled rooms are not reported even in the New York Times, which ostensibly reports all the news that is fit to print. All the news that fits is a more accurate description.
Yeah.
So true, Gary. So true.
So true.
In order to build his case, a historian must select a minuscule number of facts from the limited number that are known. If he does not have a theory, how does he separate important facts from unimportant ones? As Professor Stuart Crane has pointed out, this is why every book proves the author's thesis, but no book is objective. I want someone so fucking hardcore that they write like a 700-page book to prove themselves wrong. Do it. But no book is objective. No book can be objective. And this book is not objective. You are not immune to propaganda.
This is the DDD switch right here. You know, it's like
liberal reviewers should have a ball quoting that out of context. Oh, now he and the reader are in a conspiracy.
Yeah, he's front running the liberal reviewers.
Yep. And but you and me, we're on the same page, right? But the information in it is true, but the book is not objective. We have carefully selected the facts to prove our case. We believe that most other historians have focused on the landscape and ignored that which is most important. The cart, boy, and donkey.
Which is what I just said, actually. This is one of the things you can have. There is The first time he's gotten out ahead of us, the first time he's pulled a Wendy on me. But these are vestigial elements of my own Marxist conservative past.
Most of the facts which we bring out are readily verifiable at any large library, but our contention is that we have arranged these facts in the order which most accurately reveals their true significance in history. These are the facts the establishment does not want you to know. Establishment members could be here. Oh, real quick, I did not get to it when he did it. X Guy Extra, I hope your writing project goes well. Sends a super chat for $5. Thank you so much, kind sir. And everyone else should follow his glowing, his wonderful example and sneed those super chats. Thank you.
Sneed those super chats. This amount of raw postmodern Johnson is winning the chat today, y'all. He says this amount of raw postmodernism is getting me all hot and bothered. But this is true, and it's very true. It's worth pointing out that when Rachel Haywire or whatever else, we need a right wing, or when Geos, we need a right wing postmodernism. The right wing has been postmodern for as long as the left has, and they just used to be more aware of it. Right
wing postmodernism is just not having sex with children. With apologies to Foucault, who did who's better known for his other work.
Better known for his other work, including The Joys of Fisting. And
dying of AIDS
and producing.
Actually, his work on insanity is great. It's really good.
All of his work is great, but it's great in the way that can only come from a truly degenerate person that should be put down.
Yeah, I mean, you need a Marquis
de Sade, yes.
Some Marquis de Sade, Marquise de Sade now and again. You can have one as a treat.
As a treat.
Have you ever had the experience of walking into a mystery movie 2/3 of the way through? No, why the fuck would I do that? That sounds stupid. Confusing, wasn't it? All the evidence made it look as if the butler was the murderer. But in the final scenes, you find out surprisingly that it was the man's wife all along. You have to stay and see the beginning of the film. Then, as all the pieces fall into place, the story makes sense. Well, that doesn't make any sense.
It's the chuttest paragraph I've ever seen.
Yeah.
FBI informant says, "Oh dear, you're not supposed to be commenting in the chat, FBI informant. I'm supposed to get an AR later."
This situation is very similar to the one in which millions of Americans find themselves today. They are confused by current happenings in the nation. They have come in as the movie, so to speak, is going into its conclusion. The earlier portion of the mystery is needed to make the whole thing understandable. Actually, we are not really starting at the beginning, but we are going back far enough to give meaning to today's happenings.
That's an incredible parenthetical because it does a number of things. First of all, it seizes the ground of authority again. It's like, actually, there's some shit I'm not going to tell you, but I'm going to tell you everything you need to know.
Right. It all begins in 1616. It all begins in the year 680. When Alaric walked through the gates of Rome.
I mean, this is the great one. One of the most common ones is that people will start if you want to know the history of the American Civil War, you have to start in the English Civil War. And I'm like, actually, no, you don't. This is why I'm not a historian anymore, by the way. It's actually, no, you don't. You can start on December 12th, 1861, the day South Carolina seceded for it. I don't think it was December 12th. You can start in December 1860, the month South Carolina left the Union. You don't have to go back, But since we're in this conspiracy now, we need to let everybody. There's stuff that you don't know, but we'll tell you as it
for
comes
your own
up.
safety.
Gnosticism.
Yeah. In order to understand the conspiracy, it is necessary to have some rudimentary knowledge of banking, and particularly of international bankers. Rick and Morty is the most intelligent show on television. In order to even get some of the jokes, you need to have a pretty firm understanding of theoretical physics and whatever the rest of the copy pasta is.
Yeah.
While it would be an oversimplification to ascribe the entire conspiracy to international bankers could be here. they nevertheless have played a key role. Think of the conspiracy as a hand with one finger labeled international banking and the others foundations.
Is it
and
both?
the anti-religion movement and
Oh.
Fabian socialism and communism.
Holy dog whistle.
Imagine it as a menorah with one
Yes.
candle labeled international banking. But it was the international bankers of whom Professor Quigley was speaking when we quoted him earlier as stating that the aim was nothing less than control of the world through finance.
Oh, man.
Where do governments get the enormous amounts of money they need? Most, of course, comes from taxation, but governments often spend more than they're willing to tax from their citizens, and so are forced to borrow. Our national debt is now $455 billion.
Damn.
Oh, God. Every cent of it borrowed at interest from somewhere.
That was
somewhere.
us.
Hold on. What is the current daily interest on the national debt?
Yeah, I was trying to think that too. I mean, it's got to be getting close to 100 billion.
The current daily interest on daily. The current daily interest is $2.6 billion. Okay.
Man, that's a lot of money. It's not nearly as high, but again, I'm not
so about 9 months. About 9
Yeah.
months is the yeah. So
Caravaggio swinging into the outside lane, coming up with Menorah is better than Cathedral.
All right, let's see. Where did I go? Every cent of it. The public is led to believe that our government borrows from the people through savings bonds. Actually, only a smaller percentage of the national debt is held by individuals in this form. Most government bonds, except those owned by the government itself through its trust funds, are held by vast banking firms known as international banks. Most debt is owned by mutual funds, which is mostly.
This was not the case in 1971.
I know. Now it's mostly owned by mutual funds, which hold the deposits of American citizens.
Yeah,
mostly.
Yes.
Okay. For centuries, there has been big money to be made by international bankers in the financing of governments and kings. Such operators are faced, however, with certain thorny problems. We know that smaller banking operations protect themselves by taking collateral. But what kind of collateral can you get from a government or a king? What if the banker comes to collect and the king says, "Off with his head"? The process through which one collects a debt from a government or a monarch is not a subject taught in the business schools of our universities. Oh,
wait a second.
I beg to differ.
You're right.
The only thing that's taught
Yes.
in the business schools of our universities. And most of us, never having been in the business of financing kings, have not given the problem much thought. But there is a king financing business, and to those who can ensure the collection, it is lucrative indeed. Economics professor Stuart Crane notes that there are two means used to collateralize loans to governments and kings. Whenever a business firm borrows big money, its creditor obtains a voice in the management to protect its investment. Like a business, no government can borrow big money unless willing to surrender to the creditor some measure of sovereignty as collateral. Certainly, international bankers who have loaned hundreds of billions of dollars to governments around the world command considerable influence in the policies of such governments. This isn't really how money actually works right now.
Right. I submit to you as proof that America seems to be America is the biggest influencer of every other country in the world, and somehow seems to have very little to no control over its own policy. You know,
Yeah.
Oh man.
But the ultimate advantage the creditor has over the king or president is that if the ruler gets out of line, the banker can finance his enemy or rival. Therefore, if you want to stay in the lucrative king financing business, it is wise to have an enemy or rival waiting in the wings to unseat every king or president to whom you lend. If the king doesn't have an enemy, you must create one.
Ooh.
Yeah, except, I mean, the The U.S. government is the lender, like it's the bank. But
right.
okay.
This is like there's like no, I remember about 10 years ago, early on in my sort of podcasting career, they would use the phrase self-licking ice cream cone to describe it as this sort of fantastical thing. This is another thing conservatives have never really grokked until very recently. We've started to sort of figure this out, is that it's totally possible for the U.S. government to be both the lender and the borrower with only the same person, the button pusher can also be the button recipient, and there's no contradiction there.
I mean, the idea that the Federal Reserve is an independent body is purely a fiction to like make the dollar seem more reasonable.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Oh, JJ's Minister of Magic, $10.
JJ
said nothing, but thank you, buddy. Thank you for your generosity.
I thought he was on vacation. JJ's a friend of mine.
Johnson, it's called modern monetary theory, and it works kind of. Yeah, it does kind of work. You can't do certain things with modern monetary theory, as we've learned. But if all you need to do to get out of debt is to inflate away your debt, and you're the one who can control the rate of inflation, it seems like you can't actually go bankrupt. Doesn't it? Doesn't it seem like you can't go bankrupt?
And really, you can't. You can't ever go bankrupt, but there is like a constraint. The constraint is like there does come a point in time where everybody goes, "Fuck it, I'm going to listen to LMD," and they stop paying attention to how much you say your money's worth.
Exactly. That's true. Let's see. Preeminent in playing this game was the famous House of Rothschild.
Dun, dun, dun.
Can I get an early light? Never mind. Its founder, Meyer Amschel Rothschild, 1749 to 1812, of Frankfurt, Germany, kept one of his 5 sons at home to run the Frankfurt Bank, and sent the others to London, Paris, Vienna, and Naples. The Rothschilds became incredibly wealthy during the 19th century by financing governments to fight each other. According to Professor Stuart Crane, if you look back at every war in Europe during the 19th century, you will see that they always ended with the establishment of a balance of power. With every reshuffling, there was a balance of power and a new grouping around the House of Rothschild in England, France, or Austria. They grouped nations so that if any king got out of line in a war would break out, and the war would be decided by which way the financing went. Researching the debt positions of the warring nations will usually indicate who was to be punished. In describing the characteristics of the Rothschild and other major international bankers, Dr. Quigley tells us that they remain different from ordinary bankers in several ways. They were cosmopolitan and international.
What is the first Crane professor's name? Sorry for interrupting.
Stuart
Crane.
Stuart.
Sorry about that.
He's probably an American, and I gave him an English accent.
He's definitely American. I'm looking to see like what
I should have given him Niles Crane's voice.
No, there's no university page on him, but he does have an archive page.
Okay.
And he has a book called Proofs of a Conspiracy. Of course.
Yeah.
No confirmation or anything like that. The only thing that exists on him is that one.
He wrote a conspiracy book. Good for him.
Yeah.
Professor of what?
Yeah, professor of what is my question.
Professor Harold Hill.
Yeah.
What's his line? Doesn't worry about his line. He sells bands, boys bands with the big brass bass and the rat-a-tat drums. That's his thing. In describing the characteristics of the Rothschilds and other major international bankers, Dr. Quigley tells us that they remained different from ordinary bankers in several ways. They were cosmopolitan and international. They were close to governments and were particularly concerned with government debts, including foreign government debts. These bankers came to be called international bankers. Quigley, Tragedy and Hope, page 52. This is the only time he's done
There's an actual
citation in line. Like, what the hell? This is a one time?
And he also immediately fucks it up because there's no telling what edition of
exactly
people have.
Thanks. What is the standard of citation? Yeah.
How much copy editing has this book received in the last half century? Apparently none.
Probably a lot, because this is the text of the first edition, I think. By the way, the first edition, which I do have a physical copy of that appeared to have been generally unread, was printed on, is maybe the most fragile fucking thing that I own in terms of books. It was printed on absolute fucking pulp. I have magazines from the 19 teens that are that are more robust.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all, because 1910 is not a bad time, but stuff that's produced between the 40s and the 60s, it's bad. There were
this was the 70s again.
Yeah, but I mean, this is it probably hasn't recovered, because there were actual real restrictions on the type of paper that could be used, and it actually really affected everything. But stuff from that period, it'll just turn to fucking dust.
yeah it's like the glue is made of, I don't know, I feel like a piece of candy would have been more robust than the glue that is binding this thing. Let's see here. JJ's Minister of Magic, again, thank you, $10. Are we in a feedback loop where conspiracies create culture and then culture reinscribes the conspiracy? And by the way, footnotes are overrated. Agreed on the footnotes. I mean, of course, conspiracies create culture. We've always been in.
Now the thing though that people get wrong is they imagine it like one of Larry's charts, where only the most basic of the process is sketched. And what people frequently fail to realize, though, is that there are constantly millions of different scenarios of different conspiracies being hatched at once. So this process that gets conceived as isolated is actually happening in infinite multiplicities of instances at all points in time. And that it almost bleeds that bit of information down to nothing. It's okay, we just divided the whole thing by one. This is always happening everywhere all the time. So what's the big deal?
One major reason for the historical blackout on the role of the international bankers in political history is that the Rothschilds were Jewish. I'm amazed that he said it, because we've been tiptoeing through the tulips for a while.
Tiptoe through the tulips. I also think it's interesting that the Rothschild, they always leave off the Barings Bank, which to me is actually the more interesting one. Barings Bank just gets away with it, and the Barings Bank was still around then. It's defunct now because their man in Singapore bankrupted the entire international finance house, which, if anything, is another argument against the almighty power of international finance. If one dude on a coke bench in Singapore can bring down one of the oldest finances houses in the world, there might be something else going on as well. But the Barings Bank is I don't know how you can look at the Rothschilds without also looking at the Barings, because they were doing even worse shit.
Yeah, but I mean, also it leaves out J.P. Morgan,
right? Yeah, exactly.
Who was a massive, who was like a huge rival of them and was a WASP. Right now, there is another conspiracy theory that does account for this, and I'll bet if given enough time to spool out, Gary would eventually mention the Council of 300. Are you familiar with that one? What's the Council of 300?
That's really the Quigley myth is what it is. It's okay. So look, yeah, the Rothschilds, but really there's like about 100 families, and you know, like Semiagog would say the 1890s, which is like right around, you know, when JP Morgan and was like the dueling with the Rothschilds over all this shit. This was the moment whenever when the British like bankers realized that the British Empire was doomed, they started marrying into American families and they moved the whole thing over the Atlantic. So this is like kind of like so the Council of 300 is kind of a partial imposition of that. It's happening more than in more than one place, and it's got like Council of 300 is 300 families, and it includes like the Russells, Elliots are in there. You know, it's all the normal Roosevelt's normal families.
Just normal families.
Yeah.
The Jewish members of the conspiracy have used an organization called the Anti-Defamation League. Wait, did I skip that? Did I skip something? Oh yeah, I did. Sorry. Anti-Semites had played into the hands of the conspiracy by trying to portray the entire conspiracy as Jewish. Nothing could be farther from the truth. The traditionally Anglo-Saxon JP Morgan and Rockefeller international banking institutions. Well, okay, he Wendy'd me. He Wendy'd me. He Wendogged me.
Right.
In the conspiracy, but there is no denying the importance of the Rothschilds and their satellites. However, it is just as unreasonable and immoral to blame all Jews for the crimes of the Rothschilds as it is to hold all the Baptists accountable for the crimes of the Rockefellers.
Fucking cock.
Well, remember when this was written,
right?
The spell had not been broken, and
this is actually the spell is on its upswing.
Yeah, exactly.
And for those for a taste of the true relationship prior to the contemporary era, the true relationship between Israel and the United States has never been uncovered. You should Google the USS Liberty.
Yes.
We're gonna get a fucking strike.
The official stance of LMD is that Israel is our greatest ally. The Jewish members of the conspiracy have used an organization called the Anti-Defamation League as an instrument to try and convince everyone that any mention of the Rothschilds or their allies is an attack on all Jews. In this way, they have stifled almost all honest scholarship on international bankers and made the subject taboo within universities. Any individual or book exploring the subject is immediately attacked by hundreds of ADL committees all over the country. The ADL has never let truth or logic interfere with its highly professional smear jobs.
Truth or logic.
When no evidence is apparent, the ADL, which staunchly opposed so-called McCarthyism, accuses people of being latent anti-Semites. Can you imagine how they would yell and scream if someone accused them of being latent communists? They would accuse you of being a latent anti-Semite. That's what they do.
There's so much. Imagine if the situations were reversed happening here.
I know. Oh man. Well, and now, you know what's happened? The left are the real anti-Semites.
Yes.
Oh no. But seriously, we love our Mishlings, don't we, folks? Don't we love our Mishlings? Yes.
Be sure to sneak those super chats.
Yes. Actually, nobody has a right to be angrier at the Rothschild clique than their fellow Jews. The Warburgs, part of their Rothschild empire, helped finance Adolf Hitler. There were few, if any, Rothschilds or Warburgs in the Nazi prison camps. They sat out the war in luxurious hotels in Paris or emigrated to the United States or England.
There it is.
Yeah.
There.
As a group, Jews have suffered most at the hands of these power seekers. A Rothschild has much more in common with a Rockefeller than he does with a tailor from Budapest or the Bronx.
First of all, I don't think that's true.
A second of all, that is a directly Marxist critique.
Yeah, no.
literal verbatim Marxism. Yeah. Since the keystone of the international banking empires have been government bonds, it has been in the interest of these international bankers to encourage government debt. The higher the debt, the more the interest. Nothing more total interest, but not necessarily more like a higher interest rate.
You might get a better interest rate,
for less debt. Yeah. Nothing drives government deeply into debt like a war, and it has not been an uncommon practice among international bankers to finance both sides of the bloodiest military conflicts.
Uh-oh.
For example, during our Civil War, the North was financed by the Rothschilds through their American agent, August Belmont, and the American South through the Erlangers, Rothschild relatives. But while wars and revolutions have been useful to international... But hey, what happened to the debt that the Confederacy had at the end of the war? What happened to that? What happened to that debt, Sandbatch? You're a Southern historian.
I am a Southern historian. I'm explicitly not a historian of the war. And like that silence, that like dead air you just got from me was me suddenly realizing that there is a giant, maybe very important thing that I've never looked into before. I'm a Southern historian by way of Southern literature. I did not get that.
Sure.
But that seems huge, and I do not know the answer. Like, where did that? Where? I mean, okay. There.
So it appears that foreign bonds. So it was significant losses. And
but, I mean, they recouped that money. Was on paper significant loss, but that money was almost certainly recouped somehow, somewhere. And oh man, that's big shit. I always have these revelatory moments on podcasts.
I think it's just being around me, since I'm technically your muse.
That's oh my god.
Unfortunately, you got a dude muse. How gay is that?
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. That's totally true. Since I've started hanging out with you, both my output and quality have increased drastically, and I'm
amazing.
I'm sort of floored by it. I'm like,
But while wars and revolutions have been useful to international bankers in gaining or increasing control over governments, the key to such control has always been control of money. You can control a government if you have it in your debt. A creditor is in a position to demand the privileges of monopoly from the sovereign. Nope, that's what being sovereign means. Money-seeking governments have granted monopolies in state banking, natural resources, oil concessions, and transportation. However, the monopoly which the international financiers most covet is control over a nation's money. Eventually, these international bankers actually owned, as private corporations, the central banks of the various European nations. The Bank of England, Bank of France, and Bank of Germany were not owned by their respective governments, as almost everyone imagines, but were privately owned monopolies granted by the heads of state, usually in return for loans.
Did anyone ever really believe that?
What?
I'm trying to think if that really the idea that the Bank of England was owned by England was like publicly owned by England. I'm trying to figure out if anybody ever really believed that.
Yeah, the Treasury was always different from the bank. Yeah.
Johnson says the 14th Amendment explicitly made the Confederate bonds uncollectible. London banks dumped it on Europe. So yeah. And then Europe got some of it back. But I mean, I don't want to get into it here, but I could do a whole other podcast on that right now. Oh man. Yeah, keep going.
Let's see. Under this system, observed Reginald McKenna, president of the Midlands Bank of England, those that create and issue the money and credit direct the policies of government and hold in their hands the destiny of the people. Once the government is in debt to the bankers, it is at their mercy. A frightening example was cited by the London Financial Times of September 26, 1921, which revealed at the time that half a dozen men at the top of the big five banks could upset the whole fabric of government finance by reframing from renewing the treasury bills. That's all the English accents I have.
I was gonna point out. I was like, totally on the table for LMD now is an AI model of Cap's voice doing various English accents and reading Charles Dickens. Totally on the table now.
Well, except that was like a ridiculous East End accent. Like,
I know,
a ridiculous. That was like a Dick Van Dyke level Cockney.
I know it'd be so great. Like, you didn't give enough material. It takes like
all right.
8 minutes. 8 minutes. Can you do that for 8 minutes?
Can I do a Cockney accent for 8 minutes? Yeah, probably. All those who have sought dictatorial control over modern nations have understood the necessity of a central bank. When the League of Just Men, yes, a league that only contains men, hired a hack revolutionary named Karl Marx to write a blueprint for conquest called the Communist Manifesto, the fifth plank read, centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and its exclusive monopoly. I went a little too Jewish on that one, didn't I?
That is one of the most I got sort of blown over the same way I do by Micah Pohl's edits by that sentence. Like there's like so much landing on me at one time. Okay. When the League of Just Men, let's do a slow-mo here. When the League of Just Men
hired a hack revolutionary.
What?
Named Karl Marx. Yes, we're stacking superlatives.
What is the League of Just Men?
The League of Just Men was some sort of league of men seeking justice. Let's find out. We didn't even go into that. League of the Just, or League of Justice, was a Masonic international revolutionary organization founded in 1836 by branching off from its ancestor, the League of Outlaws, which had formed in Paris in 1834. The League of the Just was largely composed of German immigrant artisans. They merged with the Communist Correspondence Committee, an organization led by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, creating the Communist League. The new group tasked Marx and Engels with writing a political platform for itself. The resulting document was the Communist Manifesto, according to Wikipedia.
Okay.
League of Outlaws sounds way cooler.
Let me just point out, this is true. Like, the League of the Just, the Wundergretten, sometimes referred to in English as the League of Just Men, was in fact all of these things. Founded in 1836 in Paris by the German immigrant artisans who had split from the League of the Outlaws. Leading figures included Wilhelm Weitling, a tailor and utopian communist, Karl Schlapper, Joseph Moll, Georg theses on Feuerbach. Oh, damn. Okay. He might be right. He might not be making this up.
Lenin later said that the establishment of a central bank was 90% of communizing a country. Such conspirators knew that you cannot take control of a nation without military force unless that nation has a central bank through which you can control its economy. The anarchist Bakunin sarcastically remarked about the followers of Karl Marx, they have 1 foot in the bank and 1 foot in the socialist movement.
Bakunin mentioned.
Wow, he finally mentioned Bakunin. Yeah, I think I called him out. I think I called him out on that twice last time.
Yeah.
Although he didn't mention that Bakunin was a socialist.
Right.
A socialist anarchist.
Just left that part off.
Just mentioned the anarchist part. Yeah. The international financiers set up their own frontman in charge of each of Europe's central banks. Professor Quigley reports, It must be felt that these heads of the world's chief central banks were themselves substantive powers in world finance. They were not. Rather, they were the technicians and agents of the dominant investment bankers of their own countries, who had raised them up and were perfectly capable of throwing them down. The substantive financial powers of the world were in the hands of these investment bankers, also called international or merchants bankers, who remained largely behind the scenes in their own unincorporated private banks. These formed a system of international cooperation and national dominance, which was more private, more powerful, and more secret than that of their agents in these central banks.
JJ, by the way, asked what would be the equivalent of the John Birch Society today, and I
$4 or $5.
you know
That
what
would be.
you know who I want to say, don't you?
I know who you want to say.
So,
It's not the John Birch Society.
Yeah. I'll just say instead. I'll say Library of Mass Destruction. This is it right here. We're there.
You're there. You're there. Yep.
Yeah.
There's a certain communist Masonic conspiracy occurring right in front of you.
Yes.
A league of just men. What would you call an organization that contained just men? Anyway,
the bathhouse in the Castro district.
An organization that contained just men. Well, how about never mind.
Damn.
Okay. Dr. Quigley also reveals that the international bankers who owned and controlled the banks of England and France maintained their power even after those banks were theoretically socialized. Naturally, those who controlled the central banks of Europe were eager from the start to fasten a similar establishment on the United States. From the earliest days, the founding fathers had been conscious of attempts to control America through money manipulation, and they carried on a running battle with the international bankers. Thomas Jefferson wrote to John Adams, "I sincerely believe, with you, that the banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies."
No, this is no. Do the next one too.
Okay. But even though America did not have a central bank after President Jackson abolished it in 1836, the European financiers and their American agents managed to obtain a great deal of control over our monetary system. Gustavus Myers, in his History of the Great American Fortunes, reveals, "Under the surface, the Rothschilds had a long and powerful influence in dictating American financial laws. The law record shows that they were powers in the old Bank of the United States, abolished by Andrew Jackson."
Yeah. Oh man. So like this bit of Jefferson is beautiful because it look, one of the things you have to remember about the founding fathers is that in addition to being brilliant men of the Enlightenment, they were also crazy. Like we're just like, okay, what did you think about? What is it they actually did? It's like, oh, they seceded from the most powerful empire in world history after they got drunk one night on fucking Madeira. Okay, so like that's like you have to remember that aspect of their personality exists, and this is like them. He's kind of taken this quote out of context a little bit, but it's totally in there. And this is Thomas Jefferson at his absolute most like it's like sitting in his office with like papers pinned to the wall and like red string connecting them. but it's also, again, it's totally true. The Rothschilds and the Barings Bank were actually, first of all, interestingly enough, they were important financiers of the American Revolution. So these guys did deal with, Adams was not particularly successful early on in his attempts to get money from the French bank. And so he had a little side quest in the Netherlands, which of course did not have a state central banking system. So like when Adams is in the Netherlands, he's dealing with these private finance houses. So he did in fact have some experience with them. So like there's both two things that are happening is the founding fathers are being turbo paranoid, but paranoid people also have enemies and they're also right.
Right. During the 19th century, the leading financiers of the metropolitan East often cut one another's financial throats. But as their western and rural victims started to organize politically, the robber barons saw that they had a community of interest towards which they must work together to protect themselves from thousands of irate farmers and up-and-coming competitors. This diffusion of economic power was one of the main factors stimulating the demands for a central bank by would-be business and financial monopolists. JJ's House of Curiosities, who has changed his name midstream, for an additional $5, you are knocking it out of the park here, sir. Thank you so much.
Oh my
Sandy,
God.
what would Jefferson's third term have looked like? Capitalisimo, your accents won me over. Great. Awesome.
Yeah, I am now thoroughly a dancing monkey. I have the little symbol and I have my hat on. It's like, here, $5. Ask what do you I kind of like it. But okay, so yeah, Jefferson's third term, probably it would be very similar to the way Madison's first term went. So probably not terribly different than it did, except it probably would have been considerably less effective. Jefferson, I call him the most important president and the best president in American history based almost entirely on his first term, which was, if you do the Louisiana Purchase and buy a third of the continent, you're like automatically Caesar tier and the most important ever. But other than that, Jefferson was not a great administrator. And his second term really proved that, because he got really lucky in his first term and just like caught like the trade winds. In his second administration, he had to like do things that were a little bit more like run of the mill to run a government, and he turns to be really shitty at it. And his second term was not great. But had he gotten a third term, because we know James Madison came next.
In his third term, he would have bought the rest of Canada.
Well,
he would have completed the continent. He would have gotten all of the Dragon Balls.
No, but like, look, okay, you say that jokingly, but what happens, and remember, this is a set of presidencies that are referred to as the Virginia dynasty, okay, which they were all.
He would have set up a breeding harem of Mulatrixes and sent his progeny north to found American Columbia.
But they do this. They invade Canada, is what they do. They don't buy it. They try to invade Canada. And I think Jefferson would have gotten involved in the War of 1812 as well. I went on Prude's show one time and pointed out that the Monroe Doctrine, and James Monroe was the last of these Virginia presidents, that the Monroe Doctrine was actually, it should really be called the Quincy Adams Doctrine, because John Quincy Adams wrote it, and it was an attempt to bleed down Monroe's desire to declare war on nearly all of Europe, to conquer what was left of the New World. And he was doing it, and you can actually go look at Jefferson's court. Jefferson is actually like ancient Thomas Jefferson is actually whipping him on, encouraging him to do it. And so is Madison. So like, these guys are also similar. You probably would have gotten very similar administrations, except that Jefferson, of the three of them, was by far the worst administrator and the most autistic when he was actually president. So it probably would have been less effective. That's probably what would have happened.
Do you feel satisfied?
Yeah.
With your alternative history? Okay.
That's not alternate. Well, yeah. It's a counterfactual.
It's speculative history. Yeah.
It's a $5 counterfactual, though. We're the dancing monkeys now.
In Years of Plunder, Proctor Hansel writes of this era, I don't have like a Swedish accent. Actually, let's go for it. Among the Morgans, Kuhnlubs, and other similar pillars of the industrial order, there was less disposition to become involved in disagreements that led to financial dislocation. A community of interest came into being with results that were wholly beneficial. How was that?
I don't know.
Hansel, come on. You give me the Swedish.
Okay, the problem is I don't know. I don't have a lot of context for Swedish accents in English. And you told me that you were about to do a Swedish one, and it was close enough that like my brain, yeah, that was the best Swedish accent I've ever heard. Yeah.
Anyway, all of these people are probably just Americans.
Yes.
You're the Proctor Hansel. Come on. Gabe for $1.99.
Damn, Gabe.
Hamilton 2-term presidency is greater than Jefferson 3rd term. I mean, I thought we were against central banks here.
Yeah,
Hamilton definitely would have. Yeah,
Hamiltonian coup. Okay, like what would have been even better for $3.99 is an Aaron Burr presidency. You know.
Yep.
Wait, what do you have on your dark bingo history? It's like Aaron Burr's conspiracy to carve out a kingdom in Spanish Georgia succeeds, and that state is still there. You know?
It would be Aaron Burr founds the CIA 150 years early. That's
it's the iceberg meme. You know, that's like way down deep in the iceberg.
Yeah. All right. But aside from the major Eastern centers, most American bankers and their customers still distrusted the whole concept. In order to show the hinterlands that they were going to need a central banking system, the international bankers created a series of panics as a demonstration of their power, a warning of what would happen unless the rest of the bankers got into line. The man in charge of conducting these lessons was J. Pierpont Morgan, American-born but educated in England and Germany. Morgan is referred to by many, including Congressman Louis McFadden, a banker who for 10 years headed the House Banking and Currency Committee, as the top American agent of the English Rothschilds. Okay?
Provides no examples, by the way.
No examples, that's right. By the turn of the century, J.P. Morgan was already an old hand at creating artificial panics. Such affairs were well coordinated. Senator Robert Owen, a co-author of the Federal Reserve Act, who later deeply regretted his role, testified before a congressional committee that the bank he owned received from the National Bankers Association what came to be known as the Panic Circular of 1893. It stated, "You will at once retire 1/3 of your circulation and call in 1/2 of your loans." Historian Frederick Lewis Allen tells in Life magazine of April 25, 1949, of Morgan's role in spreading rumors about the insolvency of the Knickerbocker Bank and the Trust Company of America, which rumors triggered the 1907 panic. In answer to the question, did Morgan precipitate the panic, Allen reports, Oakley Thorne, the president of that particular trust company, testified later before a congressional committee that his bank had been subjected to only moderate withdrawals, that he had not applied for help, and that it was the Morgan's sore point statement alone that had caused the run on his bank. From this testimony, plus the disciplinary measures taken by the clearinghouse against the Hines, Morse, and Thomas banks, plus other fragments of supposedly pertinent evidence, certain chroniclers have arrived at the ingenious conclusions that the Morgan interest took advantage of the unsettled conditions during the autumn of 1907 to precipitate the panic, guiding it shrewdly as it progressed so that it would kill off rival banks and consolidate the preeminence of the banks within the Morgan orbit.
All right, that totally happened.
Yeah.
Interesting. I was listening to see if he was going to bring up 1893, and he did, but I don't know. Like now, thinking about it I'm thinking about this now from the perspective of a historian who is trying to make this argument, and this is, he does not go into 1893 is so convoluted and tangled, but he is right. This did happen,
Yeah, I mean,
there's an argument that Morgan was doing this for a reason, and his reason was actually good. But it is also true. He's very similar to Huey P. Long in the sense that, it's like while we're building these bridges, we're going to go ahead and find some way to, get a personal benefit out of it as well. And
right.
It's hard to blame him though.
Well, and there's also the fact that Gary Allen is using the robber baron framing.
Yes.
Of these people, which is
communist.
Pretty loaded. Yeah, pretty loaded. Well, communist, but also something that was used to justify increased government power, which is what he's
Yes.
allegedly against. And so, like,
I think last time I talked
he's
about
ignoring
this.
the regulatory state.
Yeah, I think I also talked about this a little bit last time. The schizophrenic nature these people have towards FDR, they are in a sense very much creatures and products of the New Deal order. Like, like the myth that they call back on is it's the New Deal myth is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's the New Deal vision of what America's history was, among other things. That's actually, it's called consensus history. And this is one of the things that makes them seem so schizophrenic sometimes, is because like the only thing they're really doing is like imagining some mythic Camelot past, when this kind of administrative state worked a little bit better. It's just, this is the origin of conservative set back the clocking is really what it is.
Yeah. Lord. Where are we? Oh yeah. The panic which Morgan had created, he proceeded to end almost single-handedly. He had made his point. Frederick Allen explains, the lesson of the panic of 1907 was clear, though not for some 6 years was it destined to be embodied in legislation. The United States gravely needed a central banking system. The man who was to play the most significant part in providing America with that central bank was Paul Warburg, who, along with his brother Felix, had immigrated to the United States from Germany in 1902. They left brother Max, later a major financier of the Russian Revolution, at home in Frankfurt to run the family bank, M.N. Warburg and Company. Paul Warburg married Nina Loeb, daughter of Solomon Loeb of Kuhn, Loeb and Company, America's most powerful international banking firm. Brother Felix married Frieda Schiff, daughter of Jacob Schiff, the ruling power behind Kuhn and Loeb. Stephen Birmingham writes in his authoritative Our Crowd, in the 18th century, the Schiffs and Rothschilds shared a double house. In Frankfurt, Schiff reportedly bought his partnership in Kuhn and Loeb with Rothschild money. Both Paul and Felix Warburg became partners in Kuhn, Loeb and Company. In 1907, the year of the Morgan precipitated panic, Paul Warburg began spending almost all his time writing and lecturing on the need for bank reform. Kuhn, Loeb and Company was sufficiently public-spirited about the matter to keep him on salary at $500,000 per year in 1907.
A lot of money.
By the way, while for the next 6 years he donated his time to the public good. This is before we had 501c4s or think tanks, right?
Well, this is not very far, but okay. Are we at a stopping point?
Sure.
Because I've been off making sure my narrative here was I haven't been following along. Been listening, I haven't been following along. Because the 1907 panic is just not one a lot of people know about. And whenever I was thinking about he hasn't mentioned 1905 yet. He hasn't mentioned 1905 yet. And because I always think of it as the 1905 panic. This is interesting. It's a weird one. And it was kicked off by an earthquake. The earthquake that caused the
San Francisco. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. It did this other thing where San Francisco was actually a very wealthy area in the early 20th century. And this earthquake nearly burned the whole city down, which had this like strange effect where this is in San Francisco. Pretty much the entire city was insured or purchased, operating on behalf of British banking interests, which is fascinating. They loaned the money that built San Francisco. Okay. And with the strange shock, with the strange, weird shock quality that it was on the other side of the world from London. And when it happened, literally the entire silver reserve of the private British banking system was sucked physically to San Francisco, all of it gone. And like, it had to be like physically loaded on ships and like escorted around the world. And this caused a bunch of shit. This caused chain reaction of things that, and this is the way these older panics work. So when you think about the way he's explaining this, he's doing a pretty good job of explaining it, but he's assuming that, you know, his audience is way more familiar with with the things he's describing. So I'm just filling in some context for people, really. But some other things that went into the aftershocks of the San Francisco earthquake, speculative contagion in commodities, especially copper. Yeah, so there was also even out of San Francisco, one of the things. So you can imagine there's two sets of leverage. There's the leverage that built San Francisco, and there's the leverage that the speculators that have the actual notes on the British loans are using to finance their investments in South American copper and that sort of thing. You know, everybody's leveraged twice. This is two parties in a row that are leveraged.
Sure.
Happening. And then there's regulatory arbitrage and trust, tight money, gold outflows, and the global interest rate cycle. This is also the panic that from which arises, I think, the concept of the Kondratiev wave, which I'm sure you're familiar with that.
I do not know what that means.
The Kondratiev wave it's a kind of a logarithmic shaped function that depicts a long-term sort of universal wave in phenomenon, and it's sort of like the Pareto distribution.
Okay.
Is that it theoretically appears in history. It's like it's a process that can be roughly mapped, and pretty much everything, well, not everything, but things like global interest rate cycles follow a particular Kondratiev wave pattern. And
interesting.
That was an idea that came out of this particular panic.
Okay. Gabe, 499. Samuel Chamberlain Castizo presidency is greater than Quentin Roosevelt fascism, is greater than George Fitzhugh monarchy with Stalinist characteristics, is greater than David Foster Wallace as vice president for Pat Buchanan on reform.
I'm amazed that you were able to read that and decode it, because it didn't make any sense to me.
I think Samuel Chamberlain as the Castiliano president would be amazing, and we definitely would have gotten the rest of Mexico if he was in charge.
I would also, but isn't JD Vance kind of David Foster Wallace vice president? Isn't that like, I mean, he's like the sad boy emo. I mean, I guarantee you JD Vance has read Infinite Jest more than once.
I guarantee you he has. Yeah. He's definitely read it. He's like, what do you so this is maybe kind of like beating a dead horse here, but what do you think the last book Kamala Harris read was?
Oh man, it's probably some like literal trashy romance novel that she read on an airplane like 2 years ago. Like
I was the thug CEO's side bitch.
Yes,
like,
yes, something like that.
That's right. No, it was the Bhagavad Gita. She's very devout. Let's see.
I've never read David Foster Wallace ever.
I thought you were going to say the Bhagavad Gita.
I have read the Bhagavad Gita a bunch of times.
Yeah, you should read David Foster Wallace. You should read it. If you have the time, it's a commitment.
I'm gonna do it and write about it.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Yeah, what I haven't read, X Guy Extra, I still need to read Vance's Hillbilly Elegy. Yeah, I haven't read that actually. I had to read
Hillbilly. It came out while I was an undergrad, and it was like one of the books that I had to read. Like, it's like I had like 3 separate undergrad classes where like Hillbilly Elegy was on the assigned reading. That was how big it was. And it's also interesting to remember who really liked Hillbilly Elegy when it came out. And it's it's like the New Yorker and like, that set. That was who really liked it when it first came out. Yeah, yep. Nobody needs to read Hillbilly Elegy. It's true. It's
probably one of the better books written by a political candidate. And also, to be fair, I believe it was probably actually written by him.
Yeah, that was the other thing I was going to bring up, is that unlike most politicians' books, you can tell he was the guy that wrote it. Like, it's the same voice as his blog,
Yep. It is a little weird. It is a little weird that he's the vice president. It's like if Andy Weir became vice president.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yes. But people talk about it's like, yeah, in 2028 or whatever. It's like, I can't really imagine a timeline where he's vice president. Imagining a timeline where JD Vance is the president of the United States is like, I don't know how. I can't say anything about it because I literally can't imagine it.
it's tough to imagine. It's hard to imagine a president with a beard.
That's true. Yeah, I wonder who the last one was. The last one had to be
probably like Andrew. I almost said Andrew Garfield, James Garfield. Yeah,
it might be. Yeah, I think you're right. It's been a long time.
And he got assassinated. Yeah,
Lyndon Johnson turned like. Have you ever seen pictures of Lyndon Johnson towards the end of his life?
No.
It's so he looks like a hippie. Like it's incredible. He let his hair grow long and like all kinds of fucking wild shit.
Interesting. I mean, oh yeah. So in the 1970s, he got that like 1970s perm thing going on.
Yes.
Actually, he looked like an old author. He kind of looked like Don DeLillo, actually.
Oh my god, I'm only thinking from memory. I have to look it up now.
Interesting. Okay. Anyway, this is great content because we're like Googling something in another pane, so no one else can see it. It's perfect.
Yes.
All right. So, where the fuck am I? Panic, which Morgan created. Oh yeah, here we go. The working with Warburg in promoting this banking reform was Nelson Aldrich, known as Morgan's floor broker in the Senate. Aldrich's daughter, Abby, married John D. Rockefeller Jr. The current governor of New York is named for his maternal grandfather. Chart 4.
This one has arrow crosses.
This is people what been fucking. Wow, yeah, we really could have. This doesn't. But Paul and Felix are.
Jekyll Island mentioned, and he like.
Oh yeah.
Remember, and if you're not satisfied
the beast
with
from Jekyll Island, yeah.
You know, if you desire to learn more, check out our other book.
You can read more about it in the Bible.
Yeah. Oh man, the whole thing is here though. The Colonel House conspiracy, who I think Thomas 77 is a big shiller of. I'm not sure. There's a lot of guys floating around. Like some of my very good friends have done podcasts on the Colonel House thing, and I won't say anything else out of respect. Yeah. What is DFW? Man. Conan says, what is DFW? It's the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Oh, yeah.
David Foster Wallace. That's right. Felix Warburg, Nina Loeb, Kuhn Loeb and Co., Jacob Schiff, Frida Schiff. It's just the problem is that these arrows just show any connection of any kind, but don't like.
There's no label here.
And also, he could have reversed the thing that really pisses me off. He could have reversed this circle on the left-hand side so that the arrows didn't cross.
Yes.
It's catastrophically bad. Like, charts in this goddamn book.
Vulpus Persona asks us to consider the Robster.
I will consider the Robster. I will also, hast thou considered the tetrapod? But in any case, after the Panic of 1907, Aldrich was appointed by the Senate to head the National Monetary Commission, although he had no technical knowledge of banking. Aldrich and his entourage spent nearly 2 years and $300,000 of the taxpayers' money being wined and dined by the owners of Europe's central banks as they toured the continent studying central banking. When the commission returned from its luxurious junket, it held no meetings and made no report for nearly 2 years. But Senator Aldrich was busy arranging things. Together with Paul Warburg and other international bankers, he staged one of the most important secret meetings in the history of the United States. Rockefeller agent Frank Vanderlip admitted many years later in his memoirs, "Despite my views about the value to society of greater publicity for the affairs of corporations, there was an occasion near the close of 1910 when I was as secretive, indeed as furtive, as any conspirator. I do not feel it is any exaggeration to speak of our secret expedition to Jekyll Isle as an occasion of the actual conception of what eventually became the Federal Reserve System. The secrecy was well warranted. At stake was control over the entire economy. Senator Aldrich had issued confidential invitations to Henry P. Davidson of J.P. Morgan and Company, Frank A. Vanderlip, president of Rockefeller-owned National City Bank, A. Piatt Andrew, Assistant Secretary of the Treasury, Benjamin Strong of Morgan's Bankers Trust Company, and Paul Warburg. They were all to accompany him to Jekyll Island, Georgia, to write the final recommendations of the National Monetary Commission report. At Jekyll Island, writes B.C. Forbes in his Men Who Are Making America, after a general discussion, it was decided to draw up certain broad principles on which all could agree. Every member of the group voted for a central bank being the ideal cornerstone of any banking system. Page 399.
Now, unsurprisingly, you nailed that one. You know, because now it's an American, and you nailed the American.
The newsman. Well, the
exactly
other, I gave you two different transatlantic accents in the last two.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So also, like, it's worth pointing out that it's true that what's going on here. But Senator Aldrich, this is a member of the Massachusetts Aldrich family. Also, he's either the son of, or the father of, or maybe the same guy that. I don't think it's time. There was a poet in this family. Again, this is a very prominent family, and this is almost certainly these are very proximate members of this family. Probably Thomas Bailey Aldrich wrote that poem, that incredibly famous nativist poem. It was like "Wide open and unguarded stand our gates." So these are the early progressives. What we aren't dipping into is because we're not getting. I think people get so schizophrenic about this because these guys also were the professional fucking racists. Like these were like the capital
racists.
These are the people who were right. Like Lothrop Stoddard is one of these people. Okay, like this is what they believe. The based and cringe or whatever, depending on how you look at it, that goes along with it. But like all of these people, like if you follow along with human biodiversity and this sort of thing, it's easy to see. These like sort of banking arguments are actually perfectly downstream of like a lot of the way they internalize the world. And I sometimes wonder what sort of effect that has had on the right wing in the United States, that it's like, oh, that's too big of a topic. But yeah, that's
I think we should start calling ourselves classical progressives.
I mean, that's what I've been that's what I've been using for about as long as I can remember. My last Twitter account, I called myself a spokesman for the American Progressive Country Party. That's my slogan.
Excellent.
We should bring that back.
National progressives.
Yes, it sounds so American. Okay, when you think about it, I'm like, you like immediately get all of the Americana points. Like it instantly sees the cultural high ground with a name like that. It's incredible.
Right. Warburg stressed that the name central bank must be avoided at all costs. It was decided to promote the scheme as a regional reserve system with 4, later 12, branches in different sections of the country. The conspirators knew that the New York Bank would dominate the rest, which would be marble white elephants to deceive the public. Out of the Jekyll Island meeting came the completion of the Monetary Commission report and the Aldrich Bill. Warburg had proposed the bill be designated the Federal Reserve System, but Aldrich insisted his own name was already associated in the public's mind with banking reform, and that it would arouse suspicion if a bill were introduced which did not bear his name. However, Aldrich's name attached to the bill proved to be the kiss of death, since any law bearing his name was so obviously a project of the international bankers. When the Aldrich Bill could not be pushed through Congress, a new strategy had to be devised. The Republican Party was too closely connected with Wall Street. The only hope for a central bank was to disguise it and have it put through by the Democrats as a measure to strip Wall Street of its power. Oh, yeah, the exact framing that Gary Allen was using earlier when he said robber barons. Yep. The opportunity to do this came with the approach of the 1912 presidential election. Republican President William Howard Taft, who had turned against the Aldrich Bill, seemed a surefire bet for re-election until Taft's predecessor, fellow Republican Teddy Roosevelt, agreed to run on the ticket of the Progressive Party. In America's 60 families, Ferdinand Lundberg acknowledges.
There it is.
What?
That's the this is the Council of 300 conspiracy. Like,
okay.
Yeah, he's in the main branch of it here.
Okay. As soon as Roosevelt signified he would again challenge Taft, the president's defeat was inevitable. Throughout the three-cornered fight, Taft, Roosevelt, Wilson, Roosevelt had Morgan agents Frank Munsey and George Perkins constantly at his heels, supplying money, going over his speeches, bringing people from Wall Street in to help, and in general carrying the entire burden of the campaign against Taft. Perkins and J.P. Morgan and Company were the substance of the Progressive Party. Everything else was trimming. In short, most of Roosevelt's campaign fund was supplied by the two Morgan hatchet men who were seeking Taft's scalp. The Democrat candidate, Woodrow Wilson, was equally the property of Morgan. Dr. Gabriel Kolko, in his Triumph of Conservatism, reports in late 1907, he, Wilson, supported the Aldrich Bill on banking and was full of praise for Morgan's role in American society. According to Lundberg, for nearly 20 years before his nomination, Woodrow Wilson had moved in the shadow of Wall Street. So when did he sell out? Like, when is the, the same question you asked, when did he become a tool of the establishment? Right.
But I don't really see, this is a thing, again, I've never done this much Wilson revisionism. I usually just don't explain it at all. I don't know where they get this idea that he's shadowed by the bankers. They actually really don't like him very much. And he's a sort of an oppositional pro-Confederate hayseed, to their perspective, hayseed, jumped up hillbilly that is somehow, because he's from Virginia. He grew up in South Carolina. I don't he's this guy that to them, he's somehow the president of Princeton, he's this history professor that writes screeds about the greatness of Robert E. Lee. And they're he's not really, no, he's not really. I don't think he's right here. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Did you see me?
It was a long road home. Woodrow Wilson and Teddy Roosevelt proceeded to whistle-stop the country, trying to outdo each other in florid and hypocritical denunciations of the Wall Street Money Trust, the same group of insiders which was financing the campaigns of both. Dr. Kolko goes on to tell us that at the beginning of 1912, banking reform seemed a dead issue. The banking reform movement had nearly isolated itself. Wilson resurrected the issue and promised the country a money system free from domination by international bankers of Wall Street. Moreover, the Democrat platform expressly stated, "We are opposed to the Aldrich plan for a central bank," but the big boys knew who they had bought. Among the international financiers who contributed heavily to the Wilson campaign, in addition to those already named, were Jacob Schiff, Bernard Baruch, Henry Morgenthau, Thomas Fortune Ryan, and New York Times publisher Adolph Ochs.
Okay, look.
Boy, these names are not unfamiliar.
Okay, but again, here's the thing. He flagged my boy Baruch. He flagged my boy Baruch here, and if you look at who this guy is, I know people that knew him personally. Okay, he was from Camden, South Carolina, which I lived in Camden, South Carolina, and this was when I was working for the people that probably funded this book to one extent or another at some point along the line. And the issue is he was so damn pro-American. There's an interesting story from early in his life was he refused to invest in the Japanese Navy, which was a thing that a lot of Jews on Wall Street were doing in the early 1900s, like 1905. They essentially paid for the fleet that famously beat the Russians at I can't remember the name of that battle, but it was the end of the Russo-Japanese War, which Theodore Roosevelt arbitrated the end of. Okay. Though, oh man. Okay. So he gets this offer to fund, because this is how the modern Japanese, after what is the name of that revolution?
Meiji Restoration.
The Meiji Restoration. Yeah. So after the Meiji Restoration, Japan becomes turbo capitalist in like this like incredibly strange way, and they're doing the way they funded quite a bit of their modernization was by peddling bonds around Wall Street in London, and the United States invested shitloads in their navy, and he was offered a really good deal on a lot of Japanese naval debt that would have matured right around the beginning of right around the time World War II happened. It would have matured right around then. He was given a great deal on it. He didn't invest because he said he would only invest in America, and he was eventually ruined at the very end of his career after World War II, because he was approached by members of a certain brand new country's government, and sort of given this like set of, they asked him, how many bonds of this certain country's brand new debt can we put you down for? And he says none, on the same pretense that he said the last time we did something like this, he said what we ended up doing was financing the Navy that attacked Pearl Harbor and killed it, and killed a bunch of Americans, and that ended his career. They ruined him for it. That's total. So like, I don't know if you could. I don't like the set of names that's been given here is kind of suspect.
Okay.
Some of these guys were cool. Some of these guys were cool.
I accept certain parts of our Michelin history as you know.
Yeah.
So let's see here. The insider's sheepdog who controlled Wilson and guided the program through Congress was the mysterious Colonel Edward Mandell House, the British-educated son of a representative of England's financial interests in the American South. The title was honorary. House never served in the military. Somewhat like the Major. He was strictly a behind-the-scenes wire puller, and is regarded by many historians as the real president of the United States during the Wilson years. House authored a book, Philip Drew, Administrator, in which he wrote of establishing socialism as dreamed by Karl Marx as steps toward his goal. House, both in his book and in real life, called for passage of a graduated income tax and a central bank, providing a flexible, inflatable paper currency. The graduated income tax and a central bank were two of the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. In his The Intimate Papers of Colonel House, Professor Charles Seymour refers to the Colonel as the unseen guardian angel of the Federal Reserve Act. Seymour's work contains numerous documents and recordings showing constant contact between House and Paul Warburg. While the Federal Reserve Act was being prepared and steered through Congress, biographer George Vyrick assures us that the Schiffs, the Warburgs, the Kahns, the Rockefellers, and the Morgans put their faith in House. Their faith was amply rewarded. Mr. House ending of New Vegas is the best one, by the way.
Vulpes Persona says Elvis's manager enters the chat, and it's so exactly right. So exactly right.
I wonder how Philip Drew administrator is. It's an interesting.
Again, here's like another. It's like you're gonna hanging the Federal Reserve on House and Wilson is so fucking hard because that's the, or I mean, no, the Federal Reserve is, but the income tax is not easy to hang on them, I don't think, because like it's a constitutional amendment that was passed, and you know how hard it is to pass a constitutional amendment, right? It takes years. It takes years to pass a constitution because it has to be, it has to be introduced, and then it has to be ratified by the states, and then there has to be a majority of Congress, and then it goes to the president to sign. I can't think of any instances ever where a constitutional amendment that had gone through this entire process and then was passed by the Congress and sent to the president's desk. I can think of no instances off the top of my head when that has happened. Like if the way it's generally,
it's a done fucking deal by the time it gets to that point.
Like if this is one of those times we're in the real existing systems of checks and balances. Okay. The president spitting in the face of both the legislature, the American citizenry, and and pretty much everything else the actual Constitution is based on, you would have serious problems. You have legitimacy issues, okay? And also it happened like 3 or 4 weeks, like this particular bill was passed. It was in the first year of Wilson's presidency, and I think it was very early. So it was just like something that was already a done deal by the time Wilson was president, and it gets hung on him for some reason. I don't ever really get it.
Yeah, it seems like something that was cooking for this long.
I'm personally involved in the Wilson revisionism, and I can't stop.
You're doing it now.
I'm sorry.
You're doing it now. Let's see. JJ's House of Curiosity, $20. Thank you, sir. Who is the more compromised, Nixon or Trump? Sandy will become a David Foster Wallace or Dallas Fort Worth fanboy. Who knows? Who knows which one he meant? Watch, lol.
Yeah. Oh my God. More Nixon. Trump obviously is more compromised. Nixon was pretty compromised. Like Trump is like God. There's no way he's like Trump's like strength is that he's compromised on all sides by everything.
I'm going to be the one, because Hudson is not here. I'm going to be the one to make the Simpsons reference. Mm-hmm. It's like when Burns goes to the doctor and is told that he's alive because he has so many diseases attempting to kill him, that it's the Three Stooges effect, where they're all trapped in the doorway because they're trying to get in at the same time.
Right. It's like, so like the thing that allows Trump to act as like kind of an strangely independent actor is that on any given topic, he owes everybody so much money that he pretty much gets to pick who he decides to pay back on that particular day. It's like, oh, this money is owed in a lot of places. It doesn't really matter which note I put, which note I send the check to.
So Sandbatch, you're gonna go to Dallas Fort Worth. You're gonna go read Infinite Jest while sitting under the feet of the Hanuman statue in Sugar Land, Texas, in the suburbs of Dallas Fort Worth.
No, Sugar Land's in the suburbs of Houston.
Oh, really? I thought it was outside of DFW.
No, Sugarland. Yeah, no. I mean, they both work. That new Indian, was it the new Indian settlement? That's closer to Dallas, but Dallas already has plenty of shit like that you can point at. I've tried to read David Foster Wallace. I did try to read David Foster Wallace sometime. It was when I was dating the schizophrenic leftist woman, and I said I would read 3 articles and then write about them, but I read the first one and realized I was like, oh, man, I can't write about this. Like I suddenly recognized what like a lit bro is, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna keep that out of my space of experience, actually. So like, I read the.
You really would have gotten along with David Foster Wallace, by the way.
I know. That's why. Yeah. That's why I refuse. Like whenever I run up,
he's Midwestern.
There are so many issues. Like even like I don't really like that I read After Sunstone because like Dustin Cole was writing it. Because there's some like striking similarities in the poems, and then I don't like reading people that I know are going to be very similar to me, because then I can honestly say that David Foster Wallace does not have anything to do with why I'm the way I am. Okay, you know what I mean?
Fair enough. Okay.
You know, but I think like I'm old and I'm 35
Because
now.
it's like an isotonic solution. Like you'll just take it on board too quickly.
Well, there's
You'll
that.
lose yourself in it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, and I know he's so mimetically powerful for a very specific type of dude. Like the coffee shop I go to, there are more than one dudes. There's more than one dude my age and a little bit older that wear that fucking head rag.
Oh God, no.
You know, and like I'm like I know what that is. It's like I have seen what David Foster Wallace does to a motherfucker. And when I was reading the,
And it's not worth all the pussy.
it has never occurred to me that women would be. I think, see, again, I think the fact that I'm so Cormac McCarthy coded would be bled down by David Foster Wallace, and the Cormac McCarthy coding is the source of my power.
There's nothing more hoes scaring than a man who writes. And there's nothing that hoes love more than being scared.
I know that's true, but it's like there's like different like flavors of like lit bro, you know, and like God, I don't know if I want to get my peanut butter in the chocolate, because I mean I read the Roger Federer essay, and it was so fucking good. And I was like, oh no, dude, no, don't do it. You can stop now. But I'll do it. I'll try again.
You know, Johnson points something out. This is Cope, Sandy. You can read David Foster Wallace and it won't change you.
Dude, that's
how vacant would you feel? How vacant would you feel about reading? Like the thing is that, you know, it would be terrible if it didn't change you, because it would mean that there was no dissonance.
Yeah. My theory of reading dictates that there's no way I could read it and not be changed, because I think reading is a brain injury.
Oh, man.
It bangs into your brain. You can never return to a state.
You should probably read
about
Robert
David
Anton
Foster.
Wilson.
I have read. I have psychedelic. Oh, it's psychopsychology, parapsychology, or something like that. I've got it sitting here, and he's another one of those guys I don't really read much of. Again, for the same reason, I'm like, whatever it is I believe is dangerously close to that already, and I don't need. Have you seen what I've done with Jolly West recently? I will like onboard them that quickly. And like now, like I'm like formally incorporating Jolly West into like my theory of everything. If I do that with David Foster Wallace, I'm afraid to see what the results are. So to like make it sure, I don't know that I can't. You can't read David Foster Wallace. You can't read anything and not be changed. You can't read this book and not be changed by it. Yeah.
Right. All
What's
right.
this channel about?
So the chat will get to him. It's fine. Okay. Let's see here. Where did we go? In order to support the fiction that the Federal Reserve Act was a people's bill, the insider financiers put up a smokescreen of opposition to it. It was strictly a case of Brer Rabbit begging not to be thrown into the briar patch. Both Aldrich and Vanderlip denounced what in actuality was their own bill. Nearly 25 years later, Frank Vanderlip admitted, "Now, although the Aldrich Federal Reserve Plan was defeated when it bore the name Aldrich, nevertheless, its essential points were all contained in the plan that finally was adopted." Taking advantages of Congress's desire to adjourn for Christmas, the Federal Reserve Act was passed on December 22nd, 1913 by a vote of 298 to 60 in the House, and in the Senate by a majority of 43 to 25. Wilson had fulfilled to the insiders the pledge he had made in order to become president. Warburg told House, "Well, it hasn't got quite everything we want, but the lat can be adjusted later by the administrative process."
Oh my God.
What?
That's okay. Yeah, it's true. Okay. They didn't get everything they wanted, and some of the things that they didn't get are things that would have actually stripped out the private control. It would have actually stripped out the sort of bank. Oh my God. What? So Woodrow Wilson got it passed. While he's president, he passes it in the House of Representatives.
Mm-hmm.
No, dude, no. Not how that works.
Well, the idea I think that they were stating was that Roosevelt and Wilson were both bought and paid for so that they would not veto. I think that's the argument that Gary Allen's making here.
And he's not making a specific argument at all. He's doing a lot of hand waving.
Yes, okay? Yes, it is very non-specific. Absolutely. There was genuine opposition to the act, but it could not match the power of the bill's advocates. Conservative Henry Cabot Lodge Sr. proclaimed with great foresight, "The bill as it stands seems to me to open the way to a vast inflation of currency. I do not like to think that any law can be passed which will make it possible to submerge the gold standard in a flood of irredeemable paper currency." After the vote, Congressman Charles A. Lindbergh Sr., father of the famous aviator, told Congress, "This act establishes the most gigantic trust on earth. When the president signs this act, the invisible government by the money printer, proven to exist by the money trust investigation, will be legalized. This is the Aldrich bill in disguise. The new law will create inflation whenever the trust wants inflation." The Federal Reserve Act was and still is hailed as a victory of democracy over the money trust. Nothing could be farther from the truth. The whole central bank concept was engineered by the very group it was supposed to strip of power. The myth that the money trust had been defrocked should have been exploded when Paul Warburg was appointed to the first Federal Reserve Board, a board which was handpicked by Colonel House. Paul Warburg relinquished his $500,000 a year job as a Kuhn Loeb partner to take a $12,000 a year job with the Federal Reserve. The accidentalists who teach in our university, and we're coming back to accidentalism, by the way, from the earlier chapter, who teach in our universities would have you believe that he did it because he was a public-spirited citizen. And the man who served as chairman of the New York Federal Reserve Bank during its early critical years was the same Benjamin Strong of the Morgan interests, who accompanied Warburg, Davis, and Vanderlip et al. To Jekyll Island, Georgia, to draft the Aldrich Bill. How powerful is our central bank? The Federal Reserve controls our money supply and interest rates and thereby manipulates the entire economy, creating inflation or deflation, recession or boom, and setting the stock market up or down at a whim. The Federal Reserve is so powerful that Congressman Wright Patman, chairman of the House Banking Committee, maintains, "In the United States today, we have in effect two governments. We have the duly constituted government, and then we have an independent, uncontrolled, and uncoordinated government in the Federal Reserve System operating the money powers which are reserved to Congress by the Constitution."
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, what?
Why did you choose a Southern accent there?
Wright Patman sounds like a Southern gentleman. I don't know where he's from.
He was born in Texarkana, and he was the chairman of he was the representative from one of the poorest congressional constituencies in the country. And in fact, you know how we were talking about how mutual funds own everything now?
Sure.
Okay. The reason that is the case is because the Democrats in 2 years. So this is the point. At the time this is being written, Wright Patman has been the chairman of, I can't remember what the incredibly powerful committee he was the chairman of. It was something about some banking oversight committee. Sure. And the
House Banking Committee.
Yeah. I mean, that must have been
what it says right here.
Okay. Yeah. The 1974, so the post-Watergate election actually brings about a class of Democrat new representatives that are they're culturally oriented, but they're not anti-banker. Okay. And the first thing they do, this is like the revolution of the Watergate babies is what this is called. When there's the biggest freshman class of congressmen ever. And a lot of them are these new syndicated group of first year congressmen that are doing a coup in the Democratic Party. and they their first victim is they dethroned, like they pulled Wright Patman off of his like committee committee chair, and essentially that was the privatization of the Democrat Party. That was like, there's a great Atlantic article about it called "How Democrats Lost Their Populist Soul." It's an Atlantic article from about 10 years ago. It's incredible.
Does that go on your list of most consequential events?
Yes. Okay. Actually, I
Okay.
was actually going to. I very nearly brought it up whenever we were talking about that.
Okay. Yeah. We're gonna go like maybe Jekyll Island meeting or something like that, and we'll go that. All right. I don't know. Yeah, obviously the Jekyll Island meeting is that was a fait accompli, right?
Right.
Okay. Let's see. Neither presidents, congressmen, nor secretaries of the Treasury direct the Federal Reserve. In the matter of money, the Federal Reserve directs them. The uncontrolled power of the Fed was admitted by the Secretary of Treasury, David M. Kennedy, in an interview for the May 5th, 1969 issue of U.S. News and World Report. Okay, why does he point out that, like Aldrich was falsely campaigning against a bill that basically should still have his name on it, and then just like believe the Secretary of the Treasury, David M. Kennedy, when he says the Federal Reserve is not controlled by the government? This is like very inconsistent, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're just picking somebody to agree with. But there's like never really much of a basis for like why did you choose to believe this guy?
Yeah. Right. It's just because he wanted to quote, because quote adds authority. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you approve of the latest credit tightening moves? It's not my job to approve or disapprove. It is the action of the Federal Reserve. Professor Carol, that's it. That was the whole thing. That's the whole quote.
Yeah.
Wow. Professor Carol Quigley of Harvard, Princeton, and Georgetown universities wrote a book disclosing an international banker's plan to control the world from behind the political and financial scene. Quigley revealed the plans of billionaires to establish dictatorship of the super rich disguised as workers' democracies.
I mean, every time Quigley is mentioned, he has to, like, his entire list of titles has to be reread. Like, he has to be totally reintroduced every time. This is the same book over and over and over again that he's citing. And every time he's like, who wrote a book? It's like, just dude.
I think this is like a formatting system. I think this is a formatting thing here. Like, I think that actually, I don't know why these particular two photos are here in this.
He's like literally just now decided to do that. I guarantee you.
All right. Well, I'll refer to the physical copy and I'll tell you.
Oh yeah. I'm interested.
J.P. Morgan created artificial panic used as an excuse to pass the Federal Reserve Act. Morgan was instrumental in pushing the U.S. into World War I to protect his loans to the British government. He financed socialist groups to create an all-powerful centralized government, which international bankers would control at the apex from behind the scenes. After his death, his partners helped finance the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia.
That's all true.
I mean, like, he pushed the U.S. into World War I to protect his loans to the British government.
No, he didn't. Yeah, like. Okay, now look, this.
Why the fuck? Why? Okay, why the fuck did it start? Like, you decide to start a massive conflict to finance multiple sides, but you didn't plan on including another power. I don't know. Like,
no, this one's interesting, but it's like this is a time, I know this story incredibly well. And I can tell you this is one of these times where his lack of specificity is deliberately obscuring some things that he knows his own narrative is kind of dependent on. But it is true that because he would literally have to come out against Israel and the British to be able to talk about that, and that would be, especially in 1971, that would be fucking it. Like,
right?
Like you're flirting with more dangerous revisionism than anti-Israeli anti-revisionism here. You're flirting with anti-British revisionism, which is actually probably like at the bottom of esoteric things that you can get totally fucked for, questioning the relationship between the United States and Great Britain is the quickest way
What
to get
if I
yourself.
told you?
Yeah, yes.
That the queen was a whore and she sucks dicks in hell.
Yes.
Oh my God. And curiously enough, the Federal Reserve System has never been audited and has firmly resisted all attempts by House Banking Committee Chairman Wright Patman to have it audited. Oh boy.
So
Yes.
now we've done the thing
Auditing
where
the Fed.
it's interesting. Wright Patman is also known as the last of the New Dealers. So here we are again with this narrative that recursively actually falls back on the New Deal as the moral dipstick against which everything is measured. Wright Patman's a New Dealer. Right now he's like defending the last visible representative of New Deal policy in the American government. It's fascinating.
I've got a moral dipstick. But that's just because it looks like the mushroom.
Yeah.
Gross. Okay. How successful has the Federal Reserve System been? It depends on your point of view. Since Woodrow Wilson took his oath of office, the national debt has risen from $1 billion to $455 billion. God damn it. Right. Sandbatch, you want to Jamie me up whatever the national debt is right now?
Oh my God. You know,
okay.
We were told what it was last week, and I think Jeff Dice was saying something about it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just a big number. It's not meaningful to remember. The total amount of interest paid since then to the international bankers holding that debt is staggering, with interest having become the third largest item in the federal budget. Oh boy.
36.2 trillion is the answer, by the way.
36.2 trillion. Okay, great.
Trillion with a T.
Interest on the national debt is now 22 billion every year. Okay, that was in 1971, and as we established earlier, it is 2.6 billion every, or 2.2 billion every day now. And climbing steeply as inflation pushes up the interest rate on government bonds. Meanwhile, our gold is mortgaged to European central banks and our silver has all been sold. Well, with economic catastrophe imminent. Hey, remember when they were going to open Fort Knox? Whatever happened with that? Oh, they were like, oh, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. Okay.
Wait, worth pointing out, they didn't say gold. He did not just say gold. What did he say?
He did say gold.
He says silver as well.
Our gold is mortgaged to European central banks, and our silver has all been sold.
Okay, the silver thing I think is possibly more interesting.
Why?
Because one of the guys that's almost certainly involved in
his last name is Silverman.
No, it's not. It's like, you're familiar with the Yankee Cowboy War?
I am not.
It's too esoteric to get into right now. But Nelson Bunker Hunt, and this is the Bunker Hunt family of Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas, who are they are the last. They attempted to run an effective corner on the silver bullion market in the night, and they were turbo Birchers. Okay, John Birchers. Okay, they are almost certainly involved in funding the expedition or the entire political apparatus that this book is behind. That's behind this book. It's fascinating because this is certainly a banking scam. But this is the last time. This is the thing that fucks the silver market up totally. Why the bullion market is. I don't know quite exactly what happened, but I know that the silver market bullshit was huge with the rise of the early Conservative Party, and that the Bunker Hunt family. I met the last one that was still alive. That's how close to this group of people I kind of was when I was working, and they were turbo conservatives, like pretty much funded everything, like turbo billionaires. There's not really any. There's the Peter Thiels of the 1960s in a lot of ways. So it's interesting that gets brought up.
Yeah. When the Federal Reserve System was foisted on an unsuspecting American public, there were absolute guarantees that there would be no more boom and bust economic cycles. Oh boy. Okay. Friedrich Hayek. Yeah. the men who behind the scenes were pushing the central bank concept for the international bankers faithfully promised that from then on there would be only steady growth and perpetual prosperity. However, Congressman Charles A. Lindbergh Sr. accurately proclaimed, "From now on, depressions will be scientifically created." Using a central bank to create alternate periods of inflation and deflation, and thus whipsawing the public for vast profits, had been worked out by international bankers to an exact science. Absolutely not, but okay.
I mean, they were trying. They
were trying, but lack of humility here, and also like, when was the last deflationary cycle? Right?
God,
yeah,
like 1913. Yeah.
Having built it, well, obviously not 1913 because the Depression was deflationary. But
yeah, okay.
Having built the Federal Reserve as a tool to consolidate and control wealth, the international bankers were now ready to make a major killing. Between 1923 and 1929, the Federal Reserve inflated the money supply by 62%. Much of this new money was used to bid the stock market up to dizzying heights. That's not untrue. Yeah.
That totally happened.
That totally happened. Still happens. At the same time that enormous amounts of credit money were being made available, the mass media began to ballyhoo tales of the instant riches to be made in the stock market. According to Ferdinand Lundberg, for profits to be made on these funds, the public has to be induced to speculate. And it is so induced by misleading newspaper accounts, many of them bought and paid for by the brokers that operate the pools.
Okay.
The House hearing,
Yeah, no, go ahead.
The House hearings on stabilization of the purchasing power of the dollar. Wow, that great hearings. Yeah, do congressional hearings do anything? What did this one do?
This is really okay. This is the beginning of the moment where that becomes an empty gesture. This is like, right. This is as the bureau, because they become less effective the more the state gets bureaucratized, and this is the rapid bureaucratization phase of the U.S. government. So this is a weird moment where Congress still thinks it's effective, but they're not.
Right. The House hearings on stabilization of the purchasing power of the dollar disclosed evidence in 1928 that the Federal Reserve Board was working closely with the heads of European central banks. The committee warned that a major crash had been planned in 1927. At a secret luncheon of the Federal Reserve Board and heads of European central banks, the committee warned the international bankers were tightening the noose. Montague Norman, governor of the Bank of England, came to Washington on February 6th, 1929, to confer with Andrew Mellon, Secretary of the Treasury. On November 11th, 1927, the Wall Street Journal described Mr. Norman as the currency dictator of Europe. Professor Carol Quigley notes that Norman, a close confidant of J.P. Morgan, admitted, "I hold the hegemony of the world." Immediately after this mysterious visit, the Federal Reserve Board reversed its easy money policy and began raising the discount rate. The balloon, which had been inflated constantly for nearly 7 years, was about to be exploded.
Hegemony. That quote is almost certainly faked, because hegemony is not a word that would have been in the Gilded Age vocabulary. It actually only enters the American vernacular English in the 1970s, because it's a thing that's theorized by Antonio Gramsci. Okay. And Antonio Gramsci had not written his theory of hegemony at the time when Morgan is supposed to have made this quotation. So this is bullshit. Whether or not he knows it, I'm not certain.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. The engram for hegemony does have a spike in 1918.
In 1918, so that's gonna be probably when Gramsci is. No, I don't know when. I think he's 1920s. I wonder what causes that.
I don't know.
Interesting. We're gonna find out. I'll report back.
JJ's House of Curiosities. Both of y'all rate True Detective 1 and speak to how close it was to revealing the real behind state level politics, etc. Plus, enjoy a midnight meal or nightcap. Shout out to Pizzolato. Please do the Franklin Scandal by Nick Bryant or John DeCamp's book. Okay, that's a big one. That's a big one, but it's for $50. So thank you very much, JJ's House of Curiosities. Okay, so I have not seen a single episode of True Detective.
Have you not?
I'm going to rate it a 10 of 10.
Have you not seen True Detective?
I've not seen any True Detective.
Oh my God, dude.
I literally had people in my real life tell me today, you have to watch season 1.
Okay, but the first thing I would ask is there a reason you haven't watched it? I feel like
it's literally not. There's no reason.
Interesting.
I've just been doing other things.
You should definitely watch the first 2 seasons. But to Joe, what is the real behind state level politics that it's run? It's very close to revealing the real behind Louisiana politics, which is that the entire state is owned by about 10 families, and like to deal with the U.S. state government, you're really just dealing with the syndicate that is these 10 families that own the entire state of Louisiana. And one of them is, in fact, a sort of pedophilic, strange evangelical Christian operation. So yeah, it's really close with Louisiana. Really close with Louisiana. Everywhere else, I'm not so sure.
If that is the case, if that is the story in True Detective, then yeah, most politics are. There's lots of nepotism in politics, and everybody knows fucking everybody.
I mean, yeah, it is grotesque, and Louisiana does have it's the thing about it is it's so grotesque that Louisiana, I think, is maybe the only state that could, like, season 1 and 2 do like Louisiana, and then they go to Los Angeles, and like I think this Louisiana state government and the Los Angeles, like city of Los Angeles government, are probably the 2 best. You could not find better examples for this particular kind of corruption. State politics are corrupt everywhere, but I think they're corrupt in their own sweet, disgusting way, you know?
Well, I feel like, I don't know, you probably use like Chicago, Illinois.
That's general. Another one. Yeah, Chicago is another one.
Famously, hilariously corrupt place.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and none of those people, like, you know, it's one of the weird things is that a lot of those social networks that confer political power at the state level are based on, like, you know, not national schools, right?
Right.
So like you don't go necessarily, they like none of these people like go necessarily to the greatest schools.
Right. Well, it's also like there is a point at which like you're like,
but they're done in college, so it's like, you know.
Yeah. Now we'll say also
you can come out of the University of Illinois system and become governor of Illinois.
Right. Yeah. Totally. And Louisiana is again. This is like a really weird one where Louisiana only has one big state university. Okay, Tulane is not a state university; it's a private university. But Louisiana does. There's not like there's a University of Alabama and there's a University of Auburn. They're both public schools. Louisiana only has one. And so pretty much everybody, even from the most extreme ends of the state, all end up in Baton Rouge for a while. And so like, yeah, it's like literally sub-ideological like factions. There's a possibility that what fraternity they were in at LSU has a greater bearing on their behavior than their National Party membership.
Yeah.
But there's like, you know, there's that point where ideological interests are totally flipped by like real people with very real physical objectives, you know, and that changes the whole game completely and usually makes it into like a neo-feudal, like Hamlet, like Hamlet redux for federal monies that are getting cut off like a big block grant somewhere. And that's the way, you know, that's the way state government works. So I guess probably like that. It's like that to an extent everywhere. Ooh, sorry.
All right, we are getting down to the end of it. We are going to finish this chapter.
Yeah.
We've only got a little bit left and several more charts.
Yeah.
So we might go a little over 3 hours, but you're happy to have us, aren't you, folks? So, let's see here. On October 24th, the feathers hit the fan. That's not the phrase, but okay. Writing in the United States Unresolved Monetary and Political Problems, William Bryan describes what happened. When everything was ready, the New York financiers started calling 24-hour broker call loans. This meant that the stockbrokers and the customers had to dump their entire stock on the market in order to pay the loans. This naturally collapsed the stock market and brought a banking collapse all over the country because the banks not owned by the oligarchy were heavily involved in broker call claims at this time. And bank runs soon exhausted their coin and currency, and they had to close. The Federal Reserve System would not come to their aid, although they were instructed under the law to maintain an elastic currency. The investing public, including most stockbrokers and bankers, took a horrendous blow in the crash, but not the insiders. They were either out of the market or had sold short, so that they made enormous profits as the Dow Jones plummeted. For those who knew the score, a comment by Paul Warburg had provided the warning call to sell. That signal came on March 9th, 1929, when the Financial Chronicle quoted Warburg as giving this sound advice. If orgies of unrestricted speculation are permitted to spread too far, the ultimate collapse is certain, to bring about a general depression involving the whole economy. Sharpies were later able to buy back these stocks at 90% discount from their former highs. Okay. I mean, I'm sure that the problem is that you pull a quote from a guy who predicts a crash, right?
It's like the zero hedge thing, though. They predicted a crash every day for 10 years.
Right. Yeah, exactly. To think that the scientifically engineered crash of 29 was an accident or the result of stupidity defies all logic. The international bankers who promoted the inflationary policies and pushed the propaganda which pumped up the stock market represented too many generations of accumulated expertise to have blundered into the Great Depression. And that's what we call the fallacy of authority. like you're just appealing to the experts. So, all right. Congressman Louis McFadden, chairman of the House Banking and Currency Committee, commented, "The depression was not accidental. It was a carefully contrived occurrence. The international bankers sought to bring about a condition of despair here so that they might emerge as rulers of us all. Although we have not had another depression of the magnitude of that which followed 1929, we have since suffered regular recessions. Each of these has followed a period in which the Federal Reserve tromped down hard on the monetary accelerator and then slammed on the brakes. Since 1929, the following recessions have been created by such manipulation. 1936 to 1937, stock prices fell 50%. 1948, stock prices dropped 16%. 1953, stocks declined 13%. 1956 to 1957, the market dipped 13%. 1957, late in the year, the market plunged 19%. 1960, the market was off 17%. 1966, stock prices plummeted 25%, and in 1970, the market plunged over 25%. Yeah, I mean, but line does go up according to the chart. Chart 5, based on one appearing in the highly respected financial publication Indicator Digest of June 24th, 1969. If it's a highly respected publication and your thesis is that things are controlled by a cabal of elites, how can you trust it? Okay. Shows the effects of the Dow Jones Industrial Average of Federal Reserve policies of expanding or restricting the monetary supply. This is how the stock market is manipulated and how depression and recessions are scientifically created. If you have inside knowledge as to which way the Federal Reserve policy is going to go, you can make a ton of money. That last sentence is obviously true.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think. Oh, he's not doing anything I can complain about right now.
Yeah. The members of the Federal Reserve Board are appointed by the president for 14-year terms. Since these positions control the entire economy of the country, they are far more important than cabinet positions. But who has ever heard of any of them, except possibly Chairman Arthur Burns? These appointments, which should be extensively debated by the Senate, are routinely approved. Yeah, because it's always a fait accompli. But here, as in Europe, these men are mere figureheads, put in their positions at the behest of the international bankers who finance the presidential campaigns of both political parties. And Professor Quigley reveals that these international bankers who owned and controlled the banks of England and France maintained their power even after those banks were theoretically socialized. The American system is slightly different, but the net effect is the same. Ever-increasing debt requiring ever-increasing interest payments, inflation, and periodic scientifically created depressions and recessions. The end result, if the insiders have their way, will be the dream of Montague Norman of the Bank of England, that the hegemony of world finance should reign supreme over everyone, everywhere, as one whole supranational control mechanism. That is unbelievably a based statement, and I want to know more about this guy. Right?
Which guy?
Montague Norman.
Yeah. He is an interesting figure that I've never heard his name before.
I know nothing about him.
Nothing
about him.
Maybe he should be on the list of 10. There's a couple of things now that I have to look at. I have to look at some historiographies, and I need to look into this guy.
Yeah. So that brings us to exactly 3 hours. Do you have any final thoughts, Christopher Sandbatch?
No, not particularly. I think I did a lot of talking tonight, but I think I don't know. Yeah, but this is where my history spurg comes out. Like this is it.
We made excellent time. Excellent time.
Okay. Yeah.
There were a lot of charts. There were quite a few charts in this one, and they were very silly. I'm really hoping for some more silliness. We're like halfway through this book. It's a slim volume.
It's a novella. It's a novella size.
It's an overnight novel. Yeah. Well, in any case, if anyone has any super chats to shill right now, sorry.
Oh, I mean, I would say that if you're interested in the history that I've been talking about, there are some old Prudentialist podcasts. There's some old Prudentialist shows. There's one I did on the Monroe Doctrine, and one we actually did on the Open Doors Notes, which were one of the very early sort of steps towards the international financialization. I'll have to go find them, and I'll retweet them later or something like that, and I'll send them to you for show notes. Because Prude and I spent a lot of time talking. And then there's also a really sort of like well-regarded and has an underground following podcast I did with Dimes from Blood Satellite about the Andrew Jackson administration. And I'll have to dig all of those up and send them out for the show notes, because I did a lot of history spurging here, but this is like if you go listen, if you're interested in history and you go listen to those, you'll be like, oh, I can see why Sandbatch got turbo triggered. This is stuff that I spent a lot of time with. So I would show all of that for this if you like the history shit.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I will also say that so the next Tookies Mag project that is going to be coming out is another one of Gabe's long form biographies, this time of Wyndham Lewis. So that'll be out by the end of the week. We are recording in the very near future, as you probably see, as you might see if you're reading chat. So, in any case, we're going to call it. Thanks so much. Thanks so much to our super chatters, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.
You're discouraged from questioning and thinking critically. You must accept the word of the leaders. They make you feel guilty if you do question or argue. Your environment is often controlled, cutting you off from friends, family, school, previously held beliefs. They want you to become dependent, provide a poor diet, poor health care, little sleep, and long, exhausting hours of work to make you physically weak and lower your ability to think clearly. Subtly, your self-confidence gets undermined, and your self-image or sense of identity is changed. The leaders control channels of communication. They cut off or put down outside sources of information. Then they bombard you with what they want you to think. They use strong peer pressure, playing on your desire to be loved and accepted. The leaders may promise rewards if you obey them and punishment if you don't, but they alternate harshness and leniency in order to confuse you. The leaders manipulate language, giving special meanings to words that only insiders understand. This is to make you feel like you're part of a special, important, or elite group, and that outsiders are inferior, dangerous, or doomed. You have to confess your shortcomings, mistakes, or misbehavior, sometimes even if these things never really happened. And meanwhile, your time and activities are tightly controlled. You don't have much privacy or energy or time to think because you're too busy doing monotonous, repetitive tasks. The leaders try to control you and even your sexuality, everything about you. They want to exploit you for their own enrichment, their own power or grandiosity. If they succeed, you will declare your loyalty to its leaders, rejecting your old values and way of life. Without realizing it, you will have been changed into a person who is being controlled by a totalist cult.